Carl, can you hear me?
If not Carl, I can, Ray.
I can too.
Okay, great, thanks.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to just step away to get a pad of paper. I'll be right back.
Has Beckett been tabled?
Yes, ma'am, it has. The contractors asked for it to be withdrawn, so you do not have to be here today.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. We'll be in touch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't have an agenda.
This is interesting. We have a quorum. It's time, and I see only one applicant. Our first applicant's here.
There you go. I am pulling up your agenda as we speak. I'd like to have it up. Give me 30 seconds. Mhm. All right, we can't submit really quickly, so we can begin whenever you'd like, Carl.
The floor is yours.
We'd like to welcome everyone to the November 10th Landmarks Commission meeting. It's nice to see everyone, even though it continues to be virtual. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio Open Meeting Law and Section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any votes due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, we first ask that everyone keeps their mics on mute. We then ask that you use the raised hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile versions and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again and muting your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities are being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter via our website and email have been considered. We have also received emails from those who have provided written comment on a particular matter. We'd like to call the November 10th, 2022 Landmarks Commission meeting to order. Mr. Brunges, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson. Benezzi.
Here.
Francatelli.
Present.
Mr. Colicchio.
Here.
Mr. Dreyer.
Here.
Mr. Edmond.
Here.
Director Wong. Mr. Strickland.
Here.
Mr. Trosick.
Here.
Ms. Trott.
Here.
Madam Chair, we are also joined by Kevin Roberts from the Law Department, Jessica Beam's staff. We have a quorum. And also a quick announcement that you may have heard, item number 3 on the agenda for the windows at 2994 Beckett Road has been withdrawn from the agenda at the request of the contractors. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Then we'll begin with our certificates of appropriateness. We'd like to welcome our first applicants. Unmute your mic, announce yourself, and tell us about your project. I believe if you proceed, Carl is our first applicant, the House of Blues Gear Shop located at 2020 East 4th Street.
Yep, Scott Kopp with House of Blues.
Welcome. Please tell us about your project.
Pretty easy project. We are looking to where our gear shop used to sit on East 4th Street, next to our restaurant. We are looking to continue what is happening on East 4th Street and open up a window to the outside to extend it to our patio. So a very simple project, really just one side of the space, removing the existing window setup and using the Renlita door window system that you'll see throughout East 4th Street to open up to the outside. So if you
Scott, go
want-
ahead and run through and let us know
Okay.
when you need me to move the slides.
I would go to the drawing itself. I think the architectural drawing would probably be the easiest. That's the current look there. The way it looks currently, and that's the interior look of the space itself. So if you look, I guess you can stop right there, Carl. So if you look, so the orientation to your, looking at the screen to your right would be north facing Euclid Avenue, south facing Prospect on East 4th Street. We are looking for the section on the southern side. The recessed door storefront stays existing. And we will update the south side version with the 3 panels of glass or 6 panels of glass you see there would then be an operating window system that would open to the patio. And per design review, we are going to update the facade, which you'll see on the drawing, to have a more consistent look on that north side where you see the granite kind of where it sticks out past the pillars of our building. We're going to extend that up to make that look a little bit more even. We're going to update our sign panel and cornice on the top per design review request to do that to more of a, I guess, period specific look that it doesn't have since the remodel that was built when House of Blues was built in 2004, which you'll see on the drawing. So this will be the drawing. Again, on the south side to your left, looking at the screen, would be the open Renlita window door system. The recessed entrance currently as it sits will remain the same. We will update all the aluminum mullions to all have a consistent look. So the age on the right-hand side doesn't affect the left-hand side. And then this shows the updated cornice. Sign panel will recenter our signage. The signage stays the same. We're just going to recenter it as we're going to carry the cornice over, extending past our pillars as per design review request, along with, as you see, where that kind of weird, which none of us can figure out why it was done that way, but where that granite is inset into the brick, we'll carry that line a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner looking as we go up towards the cornice and header on the top. The floor plan on the inside, the glass, so the door panel, everything will remain on the same plane, all the glass on the right and left side of the recessed entrance. Recessed entrance again stays the same. The footer on the bottom stays the same. The Renlita door system will sit on that current footer with a little bit of a sill for weather and things like that as it needs to do. All the mechanicals and everything of the window system will be on the interior and covered on the interior of the building. You won't see any of that towards the exterior of the building or facing the patio. The patio railings and things stay in place, so there is no change there. It still opens to the patio and not to the actual street itself. And that's the project for the most part. If you're familiar with the Renlita door system, it's the same as not the exact same brand as Corner Alley, but similar, but it is the same brand as Ginkgo had installed, same brand as Cordelia recently installed. That'll be the look as it, obviously ours won't be that large, but it will be the look as it comes up and kind of has that jet out that comes up over the, where it opens. So it's a folding interior door. That's the Cordelia look there. So that's a pretty simple project. Just want to get, continue to extend that indoor outdoor feel across East 4th Street.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We are starting a little bit different today moving forward. We're going to start with staff updates for each project. So Mr. Brunges, or would
Sure.
you like
Well,
to?
I'll go with the design review first, and then we'll jump in with staff's report after that. This was seen by the Historic Gateway Design Review District. This is a little bit different, as Scott had mentioned, that was seen. Their motion was to approve this as presented with the condition that the existing configuration of the door and window remain. The signboard and painted brick is extended to match the existing granite stone base to the north, and revised cornice plan is reviewed. We're going to give the staff report here so you can understand how that came to be presented here. So I'll hand that over to Jessica. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. A little bit of history on that location. On East 4th, it was originally built as an addition to the Windsor block, which is at the corner of East 4th. And and that was built in 1875. So it was built a few years after the Windsor block as a separate addition that has its own vocabulary architecturally from the storefront all the way to the roof line. There are not many historic photos of this. It's kind of squished between other more interesting buildings, but you can kind of get a little bit from it that it's always been slightly distinct from the rest of the Windsor block at the storefront level as well as all the way up. And that's in color, display windows, the cornice. In the 1980s, it had a dark wood surround that was blocking anything behind it, as well as a large sign, obviously, you can see that covers half the windows. And then construction in 2004 removed that and replaced it to what you see now. They installed like a flat cornice and signage. And so you can see going all the way up, it is similar to the Windsor block, but distinct and different. And so the original proposal included replicating the look of the attached Windsor block to the north with the same cornice, sign band, and flush entryway, which would not have been historically accurate for that section as it is, distinct and different. And the new design incorporates the historic bulkhead and recessed entryway with some detailing on the cornice, different from the Windsor block, which is more appropriate as it has its own established vocabulary.
Excellent. Thank you for both the staff report and the design review summary. We'll now open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. I'll start us off. I think this is a very sensitive restoration or renovation, I should say. And I appreciate you listening to the design review and maintaining the historic elements like the recessed entryway. But you coming up with a solution to meet your needs of opening up the storefront. So I'm in support of the proposal.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm trying to find my raised hand. Sorry about that. I appreciate them making this investment along this corridor. I know there's been some tough times along here, but this certainly adds to the vibrancy of the district, and appreciate their response as well. If there's no other member comments, I would make a motion to approve.
Any other commission members would like to make a comment?
Actually, if we have that motion, we're going to need a second before any further comments.
This is Bob Strickland. I'll second that motion.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Going out of order. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further comments? Not seeing any. Then Mr. Brunges, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Benezi?
Yes.
Francatelli?
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio?
Yes.
Farrer?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Director Wong? Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Tarasic?
Yes.
Ms. Trott?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing your project progress.
Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next applicant, located at 3728 Pearl Road, a step above daycare signage. Update. I'd like to welcome our applicant. Please unmute your mic, announce yourself, and please tell us about your project.
Good morning, everyone. This is Shadi Al-Muqdad from Neon City. We're proposing to install LED cloud sign at 3728 Pearl Road. And it's, as you see, it's a very simple sign.
A little housekeeping, if you'd like these slides to be advanced, please just ask for them to be advanced to the facilitator, Mr. Brunges.
Just 1 second, please. I'm trying to open it in my, it's a LED cloud sign mounted on a raceway, 1 inch by 1 inch, letter faces to be white with 1 inch, or 1.5 inch black trim cap, black vinyl with 1 inch trim cap around it. And with white, with black returns, 5 inch deep letters. And they would like to have those, the 2 boxes on the side of the sign to have the crayons, so people will know that it's a daycare. And with 3 cabinet boxes on the bottom to say daycare activity center. That's it.
Right. Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin then with feedback from the design review.
We do not have feedback from the design review, but we do have a staff report. There has been a previously established set of guidelines for this plaza. However, there is a new owner. Since the guidelines have been established, there have been multiple owners, but the signage guidelines carried over with the property. The criteria in the guidelines specify that the signs are limited to the business name and logo, centered over the storefront. Box type signs are prohibited, and red, white, or bronze in color. The proposed sign is centered with the architectural details, but not the doorway. There are some signs in the plaza that are also outside of the color and box type restriction guidelines, but most are specific to corporate branding such as Dollar Tree, Cricket, Giorgio's, with the exception of Health Express Urgent Care, which is the most recent sign in the plaza, and that has black bordered lettering. Logos are more varied in color, and the crayons on either side of the daycare's name are not clear as a logo for the business or a design element. And they have Care Academy on them, but it's not very identifiable. However, Landmarks Commission does have the ability to vary signage as required. We do recommend the signage be placed similar to where the CVS is, above the doorway and windows.
All right. Thank you for the staff report. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Brancatelli.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A quick question on that facade. This is being anchored with Tapcon screws. Is that secure enough for a sign this size? I'm just concerned about the facade and how this gets anchored onto the building with just basic screws.
Yes, like the raceway is very small. It's only 1 inch by 1 inch, and all the letters mounted to the raceway, and the raceway is anchored to the wall with the like we use like a Z brackets with the like with the Tapcon screws. Like it'd be very strict. Yeah, we just installed the urgent care sign. It was installed the same way.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Edmond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Comment and question. I agree that the sign should be centered over the architectural bay with the entry in it. I think I understand why they put it where it is, because there's sort of an architectural element there, but I think that creates confusion about where the entry is, and I would move it over. I do have a question. Is Care Academy the name of the company, or is it a step above Care? And I'm just trying to determine if the crayons are a logo or something else.
It's, like the name is a step above care, but like that's what they, that's what they asked for, like they want to put on the crayon box Care Academy.
So is the crayon box their logo, or is it just sort of a piece of clip art?
Yeah, it's their logo, like they have other locations, and that's what they're using.
I think I agree that the Care Academy in there is not really legible. And it might be a little cleaner and just kind of easier to read what the graphic is, maybe without that. One question, this is the Care Academy crayons graphic, is that also internally illuminated?
Yes,
Okay, and it's all the 5-inch box depth.
yes.
Okay. So with that, I don't think this is too out of line with the other signage that's on the building. And the lettering, I believe, white and black were, and just to be clear, the black that we're seeing in the border, that's actually the return of the internally illuminated letters, right?
Yes.
And there's no halo lighting on the surface of the brick, it's just the letters themselves. Okay. All right. Thanks. Those are my questions. No further comments.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Edmond. I would agree with the comments that are made. I feel that the logo should be centered over the door bay versus the architectural element bay. I think it's competing with the brick detailing. But related to the logo, I agree with Mr. Edmonds that I think it's aligned with the signage in the other areas of the shopping center. The crayons, I think, are questionable, though. I'm still trying to understand those. I think I'm trying to find their logo on other facilities and see how they have that crayon used, but I'm not locating anything as we speak. So I don't feel the crayons are helping the sign at this point, but I don't know. I'm not going to oppose the sign based on the crayons. Ms. Anderson?
Madam Chair, yeah, I think the crayon logo is a little bit, it doesn't read from a distance. I'm wondering if putting the crayon logo on the doors, if that would be permitted on the glass. I'm not sure what the rules are in that shopping center, but and that also would draw people to the doors so they know where to enter. So that's my.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Edmond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just quickly, I think that's a good idea. I think having that there would really help identify the entrance, would clean up the facade. I think that would, having the logo on the door would be an improvement. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any further comments. Would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Edmond?
I would like to move that the sign be approved with the requirement that the sign be centered over the architectural bay with the doors, and the consideration that the crayon logos be removed from the sign and replaced with a similar logo on the door itself.
Thank you for the motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you. We have a second. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Brunges, please call roll and announce results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Benazzi,
Yes.
Mr. Brancatelli,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio,
Yes.
Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmond,
Yes.
Mr. Wong, Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trosik,
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you and good luck with your project.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
When you say you want the sign moved to be centered on top of the door, if you look at the picture, if you want it moved to the left, where that CVS sign is now.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that's not a problem. Yeah,
And
we
there
can
may
do that.
also be electrical returns in there already from CVS, so you may not have to drill more holes. I would
Okay.
investigate that.
Okay, we will do that.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
China?
We'll now move on to our third applicant, located at 4203 Franklin Boulevard, renovation.
Madam Chair, very quickly, I see that we have a representative from Window Nation on. We had announced earlier that this had been pulled, and I don't know if he got that message at the request of the Go Permit representative. I don't want him to stick around and not think we're ignoring him.
Absolutely. Mr. Pukala?
No, it's Mike from Window Nation.
So you pulled this?
Yes, it
Carl,
was.
the one you sent me?
That is correct. We were contacted yesterday by Susanna to pull this as this keeps going through. I guess the owners are trying to work through some things right now. We'll reschedule it another time.
I think the owner's online with you too right now.
No. So it's been pulled for this time,
Okay.
and we will figure it out later.
All right.
We'll be in contact with you.
Right, thank you for releasing the person so I didn't have to sit through the meeting. We'll now move on to the applicant for 4203 Franklin Boulevard house renovation.
Hello, this is Ben Rogers. I am the designer and the one responsible for producing the architectural designs for this property. The house was purchased. It currently has vinyl siding. There's a couple of features when we were going through the historical review that we found out that the existing home siding was in good shape. It was assumed to not be. There's also some features on the front of the house. If you want to progress through the slides a little bit, this is kind of just a general idea. If you look in the center at the bottom, that's the front of the house. Somebody at some point decided to put a scallop feature with the vinyl siding. We looked through some historical pictures and some views. I don't know if those ended up getting included in this presentation. If they did, I apologize for that oversight. But the encouragement from the historical side was that we not try to redo that with a gable feature because it wasn't there originally. We are going back to a wood siding and doing patch work, and this is the rendering of what the house will look like. We are maintaining all of the historical lines. The railing in the front, for instance, it has a very unique spindle to it. We're going to reuse as many as we can. The railing that is there currently was not installed properly, so it's not really in any kind of structural condition right now. We're going to be modifying and returning it back to the original style. The one thing that we are doing as far as changing any kind of lines on the house, if you notice on the left side of the house, there's a small dormer to allow for more living space to create two equally usable bedrooms upstairs with a bathroom. And so we've kept, similar feel, similar approach to the rest of the home in order to accomplish what he's looking for, the owner's looking for. Most of the windows on the first and second floor are remaining. The only real difference is along the east side of the house. If you'll progress through the slides, you'll be able to see elevation views, and one of them identifies the movement of the windows. We're adding a door to the side of the home so that there's easier access to the back. Currently, the only access to the outside, with the exception of the front door, is a small little outcropping, small door. If you notice there, the condition of the existing home. If you look on the bottom row, second in from the left, that little bump out, that door is not in good condition, and that area is going to end up being the closet for the master bedroom. So we've added in the same direction facing, because that door currently faces to the east. We're just sliding that door down to the side of the home so that there's still access to the backyard, to the garage, without having to walk out the front door and all the way around. So I think those are the hot spots that we've discussed with the historical. This is a couple of examples of some of the repair and how we're going to ensure that any of the repairs are done in accordance with traditional lap siding construction and installation. He's renovating the inside, and we're in the process of finalizing the plans with the building department. The bottom left elevation that you see there identifies where the old openings are in relation to the new openings. There's like a hashed out box that kind of shows where I don't know if you guys can zoom in on that or if you guys can see that clearly. But those are the changes. The most dramatic change to the house is that east side. These are the doors that are going to be ordered to replace the existing doors, which meet the criteria that the Historical Society or the Historical Review, forgive me if I get names wrong on the review boards, so that they know what we're planning on doing. That's the end of my presentation.
Excellent, thank you. We appreciate it. We'll begin with the design review report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is seen by the Ohio City Historic District Design Review Committee on October 6th. This was approved with the conditions to salvage and reuse the existing porch rail as much as possible, inspecting the material underneath the front gable. If not reusable, then do lap siding on the entire front, submit specifications of the 6-panel door to Landmarks, and recommendation of a darker window treatment. That was passed unanimously. Just quickly on the staff report, we support the recommendation of the local committee. We would just ask for more details on the railings on the porch, because what's in the presentation is not accurate to what's there. So we need to see a little bit more cross-section on those. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brunges. We will now open the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Edmund.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think in general, this is a fairly light touch renovation, particularly as it regards the front north facade. The gable feels like it's very fitting in with the rest of it, and the window adjustments feel in scale and everything else. I agree that the scallops in the front gable don't feel architecturally fitting to me with this house massing in form and period. So I'm okay with not replicating those. My one comment, and I'm going to apologize to my fellow commissioners who have heard me say this before, but my one comment is on the color, which these muted dark dark grays are really trending right now, but I'm afraid that in 5 or 10 years, it'll feel like a regrettable choice. It's certainly not period to the house, not that the colors need to necessarily be historically perfect, colors for the year that the house was built. But I would strongly consider reconsidering the color choices. I understand the local design review asking for a darker color for the trim because the contrast is so much between the trim and the body color of the house. I would argue that lighten up the house as a whole would make it feel more welcoming and inviting, and revisit the trim colors once you've settled on a different body color. So those are my comments and recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmund. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first wanted to commend the applicant for making this significant investment in this property and removing the vinyl siding and restoring the wood lap siding. Maybe I missed it in the presentation, but what is the material of the windows that are being replaced on the east side?
All of the windows in the house are getting replaced, and we're matching basically so that they can all match and be a more energy efficient window. The material is I believe it is forgive me, brain fart for a second. Fiberglass. It's an Andersen window that is going to match the door color. Understand these renderings, the 3D renderings, are not completely representative of what's there, and the colors can obviously change on different screens. But the windows and the doors will match in trim and color. The original house is actually very close. Well, we couldn't find any colored photos previous. It's all black and white, as far as seeing any kind of historical pictures. When we pulled some of the siding off, this color is only a shade or two darker than the paint color that we could find through the majority of the outside of the home. If you guys feel that the white is too abrupt of a trim, we can definitely address that. For sure. I'm not here to argue, but at this point, the house, the only color that we can find that could be original is the blue that's on the, or close to the blue that's on the rendering right now.
In terms of field color, did
Correct.
design review have a suggestion in terms of trim color?
They did not have an issue with the white trim. They left that as kind of a, if you will, a preference to kind of create some clean lines. The trim, the railings are all going to be painted the same color. So, they kind of went back and forth themselves in the meeting of, it's not something that they felt would take away from the house.
And the window color itself, what are you proposing for the exterior window color?
If you look on this slide here, it's an Andersen series bronze finish, Andersen E series bronze.
Okay. And that fiberglass material, that's part of your submission to Landmarks?
Yes, we gave them the specs that we, the order that we're hoping to put in here shortly. I don't know that it was included in this. It was sent separately, so maybe it just didn't make it.
As long as staff has it for record, that's fine.
Yes. My understanding is that they do. If for whatever reason it didn't make it to the right spot, I can resend or even add it to this presentation so that it's on file in one place.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Mr. Anderson or Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is very nice to see more renovation on this block. I know a number of the neighbors are very nicely redone, so this will be a great addition. I'm happy to hear that you're going to be restoring the elements of the porch. That's really terrific. There's a porch nearby that's being redone, so if you need a carpenter, I'll try to find out who's doing it. And I'm happy to hear that you're also restoring the wood siding. I don't know if you've done much investigation of what's underneath. Supposedly there's not scallops at the top, but I was wondering if, if you find any like notched siding or something, if you were going to try to replicate that.
It's currently the existing wood siding that's on there is directly against exterior sheathing that seems original. So there's not we haven't seen any multiple layers of siding or anything that's been furred out to create a new siding surface. The question here on that front gable, reason why we don't know yet is, there's some pretty significant staging to get all the way up there to investigate, and I think that's why the Ohio City Historical kind of left it as, depending on what we find underneath there, it would be more period for us to just continue the siding up through the peak.
Okay, thank you for that. I have to say I'm in agreement with Commissioner Edmonds' concern about the color. You're not here at these meetings, but it seems like almost everything that gets presented to us is either gray or dark blue.
I understand that.
And on this block, there's a very prominent house at the end of the block that's another dark gray house. So I really don't support having and I don't inherently dislike gray, but it just can't be a dominant color on the street. It just doesn't create the right mood. It ends up looking like, the haunted Franklin Boulevard. So I would strongly recommend reconsidering, and I don't know if there's other colors in the paint samples that you checked, because that would be my recommendation, is to try to see what is on the body of the house now from layers of paint from the past. But something a little warmer or a little lighter would be really welcome.
Understood.
And as far as the white goes, the titanium white, which is very popular these days, that was not a color that they had in their palette back then. They didn't have the ability to make it. So, if you want to stick with the light trim, that's fine. I would go with maybe a creamier white or a more appropriate white for the period.
And I apologize. The renderings that are here are kind of representative of the family of color. The trim is going to be a slight off of the white. It's a, what is it? It's a Sherwin-Williams color, classic white buff, but it's off. It's not. I don't know, maybe that's where the buff comes in. It's kind of a buffed off of white. It's not sterling white, if you will.
All right. Yes, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
So those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Brunges, you had a feedback for us?
Just a quick note that staff is willing to work with the applicant on finding appropriate colors and tweaking this a little bit, so both the applicant, the owners, and commission can find a nice medium ground here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Brunges. Mr. Venezzi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to speak to the color because I never trust renderings because I have to make renderings all day at work, and this is what I get. Even between my monitors, like if I take a meeting and go from this monitor to this monitor, it's completely different, but I just looked it up, the Sherwin-Williams color. So I wanted to comment on that blue, in that thank you for at least not choosing a super dark blue, because I'm looking at the actual color of blue, and it is very different from the blue that I'm looking at. But it is a trend we've been seeing. I'm not going to comment on it because I've designed black boxes at work. But and when it comes to historical district, it is a tricky thing to toe the line, but thank you for at least not considering something darker. That's even harder to convince, so otherwise.
Yeah, our intention was not to go as dark as the renderings even do look darker on my screen here than I know what the color swatches that we were looking through.
Yeah.
It's just very tough.
And is that
is
a north facing? Is it north facing the main elevation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. The front porch is facing north.
Which is impossible to render because all rendering programs are harsh, like California sun. And
right.
You have a north facing building. This is, anyway, that's a long argument, but I'm in support of the house.
Thank you, Mr. Bonazzi.
Thank you.
I'm aligned with everything that everyone said related to the comments. I think it's a sensitive renovation, and I appreciate the applicant being willing to work on the colors to really get this to fit into the district. It really highlights the investment that you're going to make. One side note, and sort of on topic but off, you will not find those balusters anywhere in Cleveland. They can only be milled. Because I haven't actually, this is only the second house in Cleveland I've ever seen them, and the other one is my own. So they're very unique, and I do appreciate that you're willing to keep them, and hope you do continue to replace them in areas that they're missing.
I've got a contact with a shop in Middlefield that does custom lathing. So we're gonna take one of those to him, and he can replicate the same lathe with a lathe, replicate the same profile.
Yep, and West End Lumber used to do it also. So so with that, would someone like to make a motion? Would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to approve the project as presented with the applicant working with staff to finalize the exterior field color.
And would you consider adding the staff requirement to submit the railing details?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion?
I have a question, or should I wait?
No, please go.
Okay. When you ask for railing details, are you looking for the mounting and the material used, or because I guess I just need some clarification on that.
It'll probably be a photograph of the existing railing and how the top and bottom rails that you're going to use moving forward. Carl, is there anything else that you'd like?
No, I think that would be fine. It's even if it's a drawing that shows that you're going to be reusing, as long as it's documented that you were reusing and what you were doing, because what we see here in these photos isn't representative of what might be there.
Right, the render my rendering program does not have that banister. That those it's a representation of the location of the renovation, if you will, of the railing. I did include a picture of the existing railing, and in the reference with our historical review, one of the requirements is for us to reuse as much of that as possible. So it's been documented and agreed upon that was our plan moving forward.
All right. As soon as we're all done and we get all the final details, we'll check it, and then that should be good.
Okay. Any further questions or comments or discussion? All right, Mr. Brunges, please call roll and announce the results. And
Anderson?
just note, Miss Wong can't, Director Wong can't use her mic right now, so we'll look for your comment in the chat. Go ahead,
I was able to join audio, so hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Benezzi?
Yes.
Marcatelli?
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Redmond?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trosik,
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Excellent. Will I be getting an email or a report specifying what you guys, your decision here?
You will be in contact shortly.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, sir. You guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. We'll move on to our next applicant, located at 1200 West 76th Street, The Shoreway, Muralette.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning to the commission members. Appreciate you taking the time. This is actually the first of two very exciting projects that I get to talk to you about today, so we'll kind of dive right in. So this rotating mural proposal is sort of part of sort of an offshoot of J-Rock Development. We have sort of a new project that is an artist residency called Fever Dream. And as part of that artist residency, we are sort of looking at ways to showcase our resident artists' work, and this mural is exactly that. So I also have with me joining on the call is Maximilian Peralta, who is one of the board members for Fever Dream, the artist residency. So I want to first, if you don't mind, bring him on to give a little bit of background on Fever Dream.
Morning. I hope everyone is feeling good today. Thank you for having me. Just like Adam said, Fever Dream is a new artist residency based out of Tremont right now. We are the highest paying residency in the area because, like you said, we want to support young emerging artists. Our board right now is made up of Jesse Grant, Christine Grant, Aaron Guido, John Paul Costello, and myself. And we just had our first resident finish his stay at the end of October. But we offer space and time and funds to support these artists. And at the heart of the program is going to be this mural that Adam can tell you more about.
Thanks, Max. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. So just to give some context, located at 1200 West 76th, you all are likely familiar with the Shoreway building. Next slide. So this just shows a little bit of context and photos of the Shoreway building within the Battery Park neighborhood, a neighborhood that we're certainly very, as a company, we're very invested in and believe in certainly. So we're excited to be sort of brightening up the area with hopefully with some different additional artwork through this mural. Next slide. So this just shows exactly where we're proposing to put the mural. So it is on the south-facing facade of the Shoreway building, just above what is now Good Company. And the dimensions of the mural as proposed are roughly 17.7 feet wide by roughly 38.8 feet tall. Next slide. These are some images of a similar program in Public Square, which is also a rotating mural system, just kind of showing some precedent. And we think this has done a great job sort of brightening up the Public Square area also. Next slide. A few more images there. Again, this slide simply has those dimensions that I mentioned called out here also. Next slide. So the system that we're proposing to install the mural is a tension system that basically it uses it's an aluminum extrusion system that is attached to the exterior wall with Tapcon anchor screws. And those are designed specifically for masonry and installed into the mortar and not the brick. Throughout the installation process, our goal would be, of course, to maintain the integrity and quality of the brick facade. Throughout, we would have our in-house director of construction involved with the installation, And we're also working with a reputable group. West Camp is the company who does installations like this that you're probably familiar with. They did, it's actually the same system used for the murals on the outside of the Browns Stadium. So similar system, reputable company that would be doing this. And we work closely with them along with Tara Petrus to kind of develop the best system to ensure the highest quality mural here on the side of the building. Next slide, please. Max, if you wouldn't mind just giving kind of brief rundown on who Nolan Meyer is and a little bit of detail here.
Yeah, so this was our first resident, just to give some background. He's a local artist, and he most recently showed in the Cannes Triennial, the downtown neighborhood, if anyone is familiar. But you can go to the next slide to show off some of his work. This just shows some of the work that he has done. In the top three to the left are actually works he made under our residency. So again, it's just to sort of highlight him and show, you know, the type of artists we're interested in, younger, emerging artists. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you can continue through these slides.
Yeah, sure. So this is a mock-up of a mural design that Nolan made. So he made this during his stay as well, and you know, specifically designed with the scale in mind of the mural and the color palette too. So it's, you know, that teal color will stick out with the bricks, and thought it's very interesting idea, very apt to be on the side of the building. Titled the Shoreway is a big lighthouse. So those were among some of the ideas that Nolan had when designing this piece.
And that's just an image of that piece, just to kind of show sort of what it might look like. So that's more or less the end of the presentation. We're excited about the opportunity to kind of showcase and get involved with local artists and give them a way to show off their work. And we look forward to hearing your questions and comments.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with feedback from staff and Ms. Petrus.
Thank you, Chair. I am in support of this mural now that the location on the building has been changed. I just wanted to ask one question that was not clarified in the historic Gordon Square Design Review District, which was if the squid was the final artwork rendering. I thought before that it was an example of his work and maybe a placeholder. So I'm wondering if that's still the case or if the artwork will stay as is.
It's very possible that could be the work that goes up. At least for the time being, it was a little bit of a placeholder, but it's one of the works that Nolan, in his stint as our first resident, created as an option for this particular mural. So it very may well be that piece of work. I don't know that we have 100% that confirmed at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrus. We'll then move to feedback from the local, or a summary of the local design review committee's report.
Yeah, so it was seen by the Gordon Square Clifton West Design Review Committee on the October 26th. When it was presented, it was not on the south-facing wall, and so they had a motion to approve as presented pending a transition to the south-facing wall within that existing brick area, which has been done for this presentation, and with approximate final dimensions submitted to staff.
Excellent, thank you. And just a reminder as we move into this, that our privy is how the mural is being installed and where it's being installed, and the material for the mural itself and not the artwork. So we'll now open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments.
Madam Chair, before the commission comments, staff, the original proposal was for the front of the building, as was mentioned, and would have obstructed architectural features. The current proposal has been relocated. This picture that is shown here is the green dimensions are a little bit off. You can actually see where the brick outline is, and that was actually represented better in the final picture, in the final rendering. The method of attachment to the building will be through the mortar joints, and as such is reversible. Staff recommends approval as presented with the condition that all proposed murals be submitted to the public art coordinator and staff for review. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Brunges. We'll begin then with Mr. Edmond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know the content of the artwork is not our purview to adjudicate on, but I will just say I really like the squid and lighthouse, and I hope that that is the final selection for this. I think the location and the attachment as described are fine. I think this will add some life to that area that is, I think gaining traction. I think it's a really good place to have a public art intervention. I think it'll be fun and whimsical and interesting to see them change. I have a couple of questions. One, that framing system, is that one frame for the entire area? Because it seems a little, I'll say, flimsy to be able to stretch a fabric over that much space, or is it a series of frames that come together comprise the whole?
Max, that may be a better question for you if you're familiar with the frame system.
Yeah, in talking to David of West Camp, it would be one aluminum extrusion frame, and it would be locked in. So in the picture here, he's showing what's called a face mount, which is not as strong as a side mount, which would be putting it on the side profile. So we would be side mounting this and locking it with nylon strips across the entire frame. But like we said, this is the same company that did those reference pictures of the public art on Public Square, and then they have larger murals actually with the same system down at the Brown Stadium.
Thank you. My other question is, you indicated a rotation of 1 to 3 rotations per year. That sounds really frequent. Do you think you'll be able to maintain that pace? And do you think that 4 months is long enough for a piece of artwork to be up here and sort of live its life and be appreciated? Or do you think that the pace will be more likely be 1 year or maybe even longer for the rotation?
Admittedly, we provided a range simply because this is Fever Dream as an artist residency is it's a new project. The goal of the mural is to highlight and showcase the work of each of the residents as they come through the program. So that's why we at least mentioned that it will be rotating, because we do want each of those residents to get their opportunity to showcase their work. Whether the work ends up being there for a full year or less than that is maybe not completely nailed down. To your point, you want the work to be there long enough to be fully appreciated. So I don't know that answers your question. It could likely be longer than just a few months. I think we'll kind of figure that out as we get deeper into the residency.
And is there an anticipated end date for the project as a whole, or is it as long as you can continue to manage it?
The project meaning the residency itself?
Yeah.
The goal for the residency is to be certainly a long-term, and Max can speak to that as a member of the board too, but it is intended to be a long-term program that we want to build and grow as much as possible.
Yeah, we have a commitment to supporting the artists, so we intend to just continue doing that. And as long as the program is active in supporting our artists. We want this mural system to be a part of that and sort of like a celebration of our residents and a celebration of artists.
Thank you. That's all my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Edmond. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to commend J-Rock for this fine residency program where they're going to be able to bring forward the work of these young artists into the community. I think that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing for the artists. It's wonderful for the community, and I really, really applaud them for doing this. I'm not always open and disposed to every mural that goes up, but I think this is an appropriate location and a wonderful presentation of this young artist's work. I also agree with Mr. Edmond. I happen to like this this specific design, but if it's something else, that's fine too. But I just want to let you know that I fully support this, and I really, really am glad to see J-Rock create this opportunity and this residency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Director Wong.
Thank you, Chair Trott. I'll just be very brief. Very, very supportive of the mural concept. And I just wanted to say that I have worked with Westcamp in the past with our installations, and they do a really, really fine job. They're very mindful of their install process. And I just wanted to say that very comfortable and supportive of this moving forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Hearing a round of support, are there any other questions or comments, or would someone like to make a motion?
I will move,
go ahead.
I'll move that we approve as presented with.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, interrupted.
Is the artwork going to staff or?
For staff review, yes, for final review.
All right, yes, with that that contingency.
I will second Director Huang.
We have a motion, we have a second. Further discussion? Not seeing any. Mr. Brunges, please call roll and announce results.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Benezzi.
Yes.
Mr. Brancatelli.
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio.
Yes.
Mr. Dryer.
Yes.
Mr. Edmond.
Yes.
Director Wong.
Yes.
Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing this get installed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to our next applicant, or the same applicant in the next project, the Shoreway. Oops, right? Do I have it? Yeah, I'm reading right. 1200 West 76th Street addition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we okay to go ahead and begin the presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So I know it's been some time. We were here several months ago, running through our schematic design with you all, and I'd like to kind of before we dive into the discussion on the design of the building, which I have Bill Naberka here from Evident Architecture Office. He'll walk you through the design. I just kind of wanted to give you a quick overview of sort of what's transpired in the past several months, kind of bring you up to speed, and then we'll dive into the design of the building and walk through that discussion. So we took the past several months to really study this project. And one thing that came up in studying the site was we found that there was a 100-year-old city sewer line that runs directly through essentially the middle of our existing surface parking lot that we're looking to build this addition onto. In order to do any construction work there, we will need to relocate that sewer line. So that kind of turned into, as you can imagine, a timely and a costly process, as well as sort of brought up the need to work with our neighbor, Universal Grinding, which is the neighbor to the west. We had to kind of work with them and sort of create an easement in order to do some of that sort of relocation work. In addition to that, we have been working with the Northwest Neighborhood CDC to draft a community benefits agreement that would include both a financial component as well as perhaps a more tangible component to do some work to improve the flower bed that is adjacent to the walking pedestrian path that takes you down to Edgewater Park. That's something that the neighborhood has wanted to see improved for some time. So we're sort of working on including that into a community benefits agreement alongside a financial component. In addition to that, we have been working with Councilwoman Spencer as well as the City Planning Commission on to address concerns in the neighborhood around traffic safety, kind of on West 76th at both the intersection of Battery Park Boulevard and West 76th, which is a three-way stop currently. There's some concerns over safety there. And we're looking at options to either add some signage or kind of look into some other strategies to sort of mitigate the risk at that intersection. Additionally, there's some safety concerns where West 76 turns into a one-way at the end before turning right onto Father Frascati. We're looking and exploring some options to sort of add some signage there or change some signage or come up with a strategy that will make that a little bit of a safer area. So these were concerns that we heard from the neighborhood and that we're certainly working to address. Lastly, we've spent a lot of time in the community meetings and in listening to the neighbors, sort of addressing some of the concerns that came up from the neighborhood in the actual design of the building. And I'll let Bill Naberka kind of talk through that in more detail, but just to kind of quickly mention a couple things. One thing that came up regularly was the neighbors kind of concerned with residents of our existing Shoreway building walking their dogs, dog waste in their yards, and things of that nature. So we have incorporated an interior courtyard in our new design that would be, of course, specifically for residents of our building to kind of both enjoy but also take their dogs. In addition to that, there were concerns over trucks. Both moving trucks, delivery trucks, and things of that nature, blocking West 76th when pulling up in front of our existing Shoreway building, which is a reasonable concern. And sort of in an effort to mitigate that, we have incorporated a loading dock at the end of West 78th to avoid trucks having to go down West 76 for that reason. And lastly, just the parking tends to be a concern. It was a concern of the neighborhood. So, in designing this building, we ensured that we have, over one-to-one parking to eliminate any parking burden on the neighborhood as well. So just to kind of bring you up to speed with what we've been studying and diving into over the past several months. But from there, I will let Mr. Naberka kind of walk you through our design.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning, everybody. Carl, we can skip ahead a couple slides. I will kind of walk you guys. I know it has been, as Adam said, a few months since we were here previously. So I can walk you through in as much detail as you need. Please ask questions as they come up. And Adam, if I skate over anything, please let me know. Again, the site, as Adam mentioned, is the parking lot associated with the existing Shoreway building, the L-shaped building there between 76th and 78th. So we would be constructing this new addition at the end of West 78th, fronting Shoreway and Edgewater Beach. Next slide, please. So as Adam said, the last 6 months or so have been pretty intensive as far as discovering site conditions that were maybe a little unknown to us, including the existing sewer and doing further exploration of the soil conditions on the site, and understanding better the foundation requirements for the building. So that has manipulated the form a little bit. We're looking at a little more compact footprint. We're now set back 10 feet off both the west and the south sides. And we're a little more vertical than the last time we saw you. So what we're proposing here is 9 floors of residential over 3 floors of parking. As Adam said, though, it did allow us to really step back and look at how we were addressing this addition. And the nature of these 2 buildings. We've always sort of understood that this was a significant addition to the property. And as such, we've articulated it as 2 buildings. But that allowed us to really look at what was the relationship between those 2 buildings and the idea of introducing this courtyard, where before we had parking sort of using the existing footprint of the 1-story addition that's currently behind the Shoreway. It allowed us to really rethink that and pull our building away from the existing building to both sort of separate ourselves, articulate, but also create this internal courtyard that could be used for residents, and begin to create sort of a heart of the project at the ground floor. Next slide, please. I think this is the older package, Carl, but what we were looking at is some of the existing taller buildings. We understand that by making this relationship between these 2 structures as sort of the idea behind our addition, looking at some of the taller structures in the neighborhood. Obviously, the Westinghouse complex there on the left side really became sort of a model of both sort of historic appropriateness, the historic condition of this sort of fringe area along the district, as well as how these buildings can relate to each other with differing scales. Next slide, please. When it comes to the design of the new addition, we want it to be complementary, obviously, but also we think that the best relationship is to identify itself as a new structure. Again, creating this composition of structures on the site. Obviously, we want to use that expression as a very purposeful utilitarian grid facade. We think that sort of speaks to the nature of the existing Shoreway facade. And the idea of mass. I mean, new buildings often have a challenge portraying mass when they're abutted next to older buildings. So what is the sort of sculptural potential of this new structure and how it can begin to relate to mass? Another idea that we were looking at, obviously in the historic context of the Shoreway and the district, is kind of urban memory. And are there ways that we can introduce form in a more modern and subtle way that begins to speak to the historic structures that, something like the Westinghouse complex or even structures of the time of the Shoreway. And then lastly, the materiality of the building. I think that the one quality as we look at the existing Shoreway building is that it's a brick building, but it's relatively free of any sort of superfluous materials. Articulation is made with the brick itself to create a very rich facade, but it doesn't stray into areas of limestone or any other sort of ornamentation. So how could we look at a materiality for the addition that would be able to be used and speak in the same way to a kind of a history of timelessness? So right now, because of weight issues, again, speaking to the foundation, we're looking at a steel panel, but a natural finish steel panel, not painted, but something that actually is, again, self-evident and allows a quality and a sort of a scale that only a natural material can have. Next slide, please. So again, the true probably relationship with this building is actually to the lakefront and the Shoreway itself. So an image sort of from that Edgewater beach parking lot. You can see the Battery Park smokestack on the left. And then the slide on the bottom is obviously how we can start to look at this simple frame, the simple articulation of the building, and begin to knit these structures together and use it in a more plastic way to create a sculptural effect. Next slide, please. And then the courtyard itself, and again, one of the main assets that we have now, beginning to separate these buildings and articulate this courtyard, is an interior life to the project, and how we can introduce light and green space, and also begin to separate these two structures again into a complement of buildings, not necessarily one conglomerated building. Next slide, please. And then obviously one of the opportunities that we have, we will be using the existing addressing of the existing Shoreway building. So bringing people through the site, opening up the existing structure, and creating a more nuanced and a pathway that begins to look at the historic nature of the existing Shoreway and some of the structures there on that sort of route through the building. Next slide, please. And this is the north facade of the building, and where we can have opportunities. We have been working closely with the construction team. It's obviously a challenging site to build on, with the railway right-of-way, with sort of limited access to the site. So they have requested that we set back the main structure, the residential portion of the building, 5 feet from the railway frontage. But then how can we look at using that in a way that highlights a sculptural quality to the building, and maybe even add porches onto that north side. Next slide, please. And then kind of looking over the amenity deck and out to the lake, lakefront, which is kind of one of the primary relationships and really where the building is seen from. Next slide, please. And then the nature of the material itself, and how we would again use that in a very simple way, and create a richness from manipulating the material itself versus adding superfluous materials. And that would be consistent with the existing Shoreway building. Next slide, please. And this is sort of a detail that we're working through, and how we would articulate the paneling of the building, both to reinforce the reading of the building, but also working with the construction team and how we actually need to begin to bend these panels just to kind of give them rigidity and get them on the building. Again, the major materials of the building would be this frame articulated by the steel panels, the glazing system, which we're looking at an aluminum curtain wall system that would again be painted kind of a dark gray to complement the metal. And then where we would need to create infill panels using that same color as the window system. I think the one other thing that this detail section shows is that where we would need to do through wall venting, which is becoming pretty traditional with residential buildings like this, we would actually create an architectural band that would integrate into the architecture, where we could do all that versus punching things through the panel system. Next slide, please. And the view down West 78th towards the end, which is kind of an industrial complex down there. The building would be nestled within that industrial complex. Next slide, please. And then I know one of the working with the neighborhood was how apparent is this building from the neighborhood side. This is a view from Father Frascati, with a pretty carefully articulated or calculated view of the presence of the building, which isn't too much over the existing Shoreway. Next slide, please. And then views from the north, which is where the building is really seen. I mean, you know, one of the tricks of these presentations is that the goal is to show you the building, but in many ways, this building is shielded from view. I think even on the lower rendering, we worked pretty hard to thin out those trees along the shoreway so you could see the presence of the building behind. Next slide, please. And then just some views basically over the roof of Universal Grinding down below, kind of that as Adam spoke to, the loading area and parking entrance at the end of West 78th, and then a view sort of that northwest corner, which with the trees removed. Next slide, please. We've kind of recalculated some sun studies just to make sure that the amenity deck that would be used by the residents receives sun when it needs to, and then obviously in the winter it's going to be shaded. Next slide, please. And then we wanted to work through some rendered views, rendered elevations. We know the package we sent, we have the drawings and so forth, but we wanted to make sure that there were some rendered elevations as well. Next slide, please. Obviously the south and then the east cutaway. Next slide, please. And then one of the views that was requested was, what does this look like with no leaves on the trees? So we tried to create a winter scene with that complex of buildings, and then obviously Battery Park to the left. I think aside from the addendum drawings, and we can go, actually, let's go one more. We in the package I think we sent to you last week, we have included a site plan with a landscape plan. This is actually the previous package for Gordon Square, but I'll speak to the site plan. Actually, if you go back one, Carl, to the site plan. As Adam spoke, the building has shifted basically away from the south and the west property lines, which allows us to incorporate a loading zone, as Adam said, both for move-ins, which I know is a concern of the neighborhood, but also with buildings such as this, residential buildings, package delivery has become a major aspect to how these buildings get loaded. So we've actually created a whole package room and loading area that would happen at the end of West 78th and leave West 76th unencumbered as far as those requirements. You can begin to see the courtyard and the entry sequence that moves through the building. Even I think we showed some rendered views of cutting a new light well into that existing one-story structure that bridges between the Shoreway building and the Tamura building to create a light relief through as that pathway the residents move to the new addition. I think with that, I'll step back and answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with a summary of the Design Review Committee's feedback. Mr. Brunges?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm all over the place here. This was reviewed by the Gordon Square Clifton West Design Review Committee on October 26th. The motion was to approve the project subject to the following conditions. The top of the tower be studied for continuing the contiguous band along the horizontal height to lock in the top of the tower. The overall scale of the building be studied to reduce the overall height of the building. Courtyard study with plantings for climate and opportunity for artwork along the walls. Details on the slope portion of the building studied for future refinement per intent of architecture. Materials, including glazing, refined and studied as well, and examples provided. Opportunity for lighting studied on the building from both Shoreway and other parts of development. Lighting and landscaping to return to the committee for final approval. There was some strong reservations or opposition to the height of the proposed building, but it was passed 2-1.
We'd like to continue with the staff report.
Sure. At this point, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Adam Davenport from City Planning to speak first before I do.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for having me today, Landmarks Commission members. Just a couple of points early on that Adam Comer mentioned that the city is trying to help with. So there's been some neighborhood feedback on some traffic flow issues on West 76 that we are trying to resolve with traffic engineering with their private parking lot intersects 76 and Battery Park Boulevard at like a sort of a quasi two-way intersection right now because it's a one-way going north. But really with more residents over there, it'll become more of a three-way intersection. So we're trying to sign that appropriately and take care of that concern. That's something that the city can always help with and try and resolve when we hear those feedback items. More personally, from the neighborhood planning standpoint, this is a curious kind of consideration where J-Rock is coming back with the addition of the height per the site plan concerns in the sewer line. I personally have not experienced something like this in the 4 years I've been in the city. But we are supportive of the proposal just as before. I think the economic concerns of the site are warranting the heightened project. We still want to see a building developed here. It is at the end of the street. It's sort of an isolated site, in my opinion, and I think it deserves the residential facility they're proposing. More personally, from a neighborhood aspect, I'm actually very pleased that the design differentiates itself from the Shoreway building overall. And I think you'll hear that from some of Carl's comments come across as well. Very kind of looking towards the future. I think we will see a lot of these development proposals for the Lake Avenue North area and the old industrial facilities of Universal Grinding or Low Chemical and some of the facilities over there. So I think it's smart to think about that in the context of that future development as well. And assuredly more dense proposals coming down the line when those facilities choose to or phase out and sell. Happy to answer any other thoughts and comments towards zoning or other planning context within the northern part of Detroit Shoreway. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Davenport. Mr. Brunges, would you like to summarize the Councilwoman's letter?
Yeah, she has been actively engaged in watching this project. She has not given a formal approval or disapproval, but she has noted that they have been working diligently with the local CDC and coming up with the community benefits agreement, and that they are a good partner in the area. So she has reserved making a formal decision one way or the other, but that's there. Our comments, Landmarks and city planning staff have been working with the applicant for quite a while now. And the main concern that's actually been for us has been that height and the visual impact on the historic Shoreway building. Although the massing is substantial and based on its placement on the property and how it is connected, the impact on the existing building is minimal. The Shoreway building has obstructed views from most angles, whether it's by trees, land, or buildings. But because it is set back on the property, it reads as a completely separate building and would be generally not be experienced at that height from a pedestrian level. This is a contemporary design, and it should be, because it should be of its time, but it does pull elements from the existing building. Additionally, this acts as a bookend for the Shoreway as a whole, with the Lakeview Terrace high-rise on the east, Westinghouse building in the middle, and this one on the west end, and it would balance the entirety of the Shoreway. Staff recommends approval of the project, certainly at the 10-story height, which meets code. And we understand the desire for the additional 2 stories, and the reasoning behind it, but we will leave that to the commission to ponder and decide. We would like to see more details on how the 2 buildings interface And if signage is to be added to the addition, it should only be on the south face of the building and not higher than the top of the historic building. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brenges. We'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Edmond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo Carl's comments. I agree with those. I think the changes, excuse me, vis-a-vis the courtyard, the tucking of the parking underneath, the setback and the raising of the building, I think those are all positive developments. In a lot of cities, what we're seeing in terms of architectural aesthetic in historic context are really more ways of responding to that context with buildings that are still very modern, that we've sort of passed the postmodern reinterpretation, and we're reinterpreting historical context in ways that maybe are a little more aesthetically challenging or aesthetically progressive. This is a really interesting piece of architecture, in my opinion. I think for a lot of reasons, you've taken where we see, like the Westinghouse building, where the grid is the expression of the structure. You've taken that grid and turned it into this diaphanous film, this mat that sort of drapes around it. And it's interesting, you mentioned the Monadnock building, or you had a picture of the Monadnock building where the masonry thickens at the bottom, and you're doing that, but you're doing the opposite because it's this scrim that drapes around at the bottom. And you almost have this quality of an industrial ruin, right? Particularly with the top, which I think is really intriguing. And I don't know if this is intentional, but with that treatment of the steel, it sort of makes me think of universal grinding, and it almost looks like a part in process. I should say that the idea of adding a horizontal band across the top, I think, would seriously compromise the architectural intent and integrity of what you're trying to achieve here, and I would really oppose that. In fact, if it's feasible, I would like to see that rooftop terrace roof maybe, be separated from the vertical edges a little bit. It may not be feasible because you're probably tying into the same structure. You talked about the building's mass and its massiveness and the relationship between brick buildings, which naturally have that, and a more modern construction. And I can see that you seem to be sort of responding to that, but I want to explore that a little bit with a couple of questions here, because I think some of these renderings look very different in terms of its mass and solidity, and I think it has to do with the quality of the glass. So I'd like to ask, what type of glass are we looking at here? Is this just, like low-E transparent glass? Some of the renderings look very reflective, some look more transparent. And also, I'd like to hear more about the treatment of the steel, because I think those surface treatments are going to have a lot to do with the visual success of this, because that's, the form of the building, the tectonics of the building itself are pretty straightforward. You're relying very heavily on that surface treatment for your architectural expression. So if you could tell me more about how the steel is treated, exactly what that is, and what the character of the glass is, I would appreciate that.
So thank you. I'll address the glass first, because I think you obviously in Ohio City, we have an example of a new building that has highly reflective glass, which I think to the detriment of that project. We would be looking at something in the sort of solar band 60-70 range, which obviously is a low E glass, but is fairly transparent. I think, again, you're capturing at least the design team's thoughts about this building, again, of walking that line between something that a building that expresses a historic solidity, but also is a very modern diaphanous, I think you even used facade, right? I mean, incorporating all of those sort of modern qualities. So we do want the glass to have a level of transparency, which I think is in keeping with that approach. The steel is we experimented with it extensively at Electric Gardens. In the end, it was more of an artisanal process. So at the entry, that would be a direct example of the steel finish we would be using. It's a core 10 steel base, which is descaled, cleaned, and it's a finishing process that it basically seals the steel, that kind of natural state of the steel, and brings out some of that coloring. So it's funny. It's a very artificial process that makes the steel look natural as possible. And then obviously it protects the steel with a sealer. And then we have the core 10 underneath that if they're over time, if there's ever degradation of that finish, that, you know, the steel won't ever perforate. So I would say that, you know, those steel columns at the entrance to Electric Gardens are exactly what we're looking to replicate with the construction team as the material here.
Okay. Thank you. And one other comment on that steel cladding. I think that chevron profile that you have in the horizontals and the verticals, I think that's also really important to the feel of the building. Yeah, I don't think your renderings do this justice. And I think on the rare occasion that we have sunshine in Cleveland, it will really, really make that facade pop and will be interesting. I don't have any issues with the height given where it's situated. I look forward to seeing this on my daily commute to Lakewood. I think this will be as interesting during construction as when it's complete. My only concern are the traffic situations, which I'm glad to know that you're working with planning on those. So other than that, I think this is a really interesting building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dryer? Thank you, Mr. Edmund. Mr. Dryer?
Yeah, I only have a couple of comments. Overall, I think it's a very nice looking building. I didn't really realize this was the same outfit that did Electric Gardens, which I really like that building a lot. I gotta say, I have to disagree with my colleague, or not even my colleague, but Mr. Edmund. The top of the building just really bothers me. It looks like it's not finished. I keep expecting one of those pillars to fall when the wind blows. So I don't know what, I understand the rationale about the architecture and the modern concept, but it still just sort of frankly rubs me the wrong way. The only other thing I want to say is I really appreciate that you moved the loading and the mailroom to 78th Street, which is largely a non-residential street. The people I know who live in this neighborhood are long-term residents, and which means they were there before Battery Park was there. And these are the people who are frankly suffering a lot of development fatigue over all of the continual sort of now perpetual state of construction. It's a wonderful thing for our city, obviously, but when you have to live through it, it maybe not so much. So that's all I got.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Dryer. Mr. Brancatelli?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I also would like to commend the project design. I think it is an amazing and will be a significant architectural feature along our highway. But I don't travel that anymore since I don't take my son to St. Ed's anymore. So, but still go there to visit family members, and it just would be a wonderful addition to our horizon there. A couple quick questions, and I'm not sure if this is to Carl or staff, but was this given conceptual approval previously?
Yes, this was reviewed conceptually both by the local design review and this commission.
Okay, and at that time, I thought the height met the legal limits.
That is correct. I think they were proposing a 10-story, which was within. So now, and actually, we should probably ask Adam, what are the variances that are being requested at this time as well?
This project, to Commission Member Brancatelli, this project will still end up on the Board of Zoning Appeals agenda. It would have ended up for, I think, 2 issues before, one being the floor area ratio of living space to allotted lot area, and then I think a rear yard situation that is required for most lots in the city of Cleveland. That's mainly to do with single family houses and not, actual large residential buildings. So it's kind of a layover from old code language. But I think and now with this current proposal, it'll an addition of maybe Adam Comer or the architect can clarify, but it would be, around 18 feet of additional height variance needed. So 3 agenda items.
Yeah, it ends up being about 22 feet we're looking for, the 2 stories.
Do you have any additional questions, Mr. Brancatelli? We may have lost him. I know he messaged me. He's in Florida and having issues. So we will move forward and come back to him if he joins us again. Director Wong.
Thank you, Chair Trott. And I just want to commend the design team. I echo the comments of my colleagues around how strong the design is. I think the architecture is super interesting. I like how it really ties back to our industrial heritage, and it really sets itself apart from much of the other architecture that we tend to see. And so I really think this is a remarkable project, very fresh, very clean. And I have no issues with the height, and I like how it is as presented. So I just want to say that I appreciate the positive challenge that this provides from a design standpoint to our city. I will also say that I think from the perspective of the Shoreway and how we've tried to really slow down the traffic and really create a more tame Shoreway, I do believe that projects like this will help with creating that sort of edge and really start to tame the traffic there, I hope. So just again, really want to commend you. I'm on board and I really like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Benazzi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's probably going to be lots of commending from people, but mine was from the standpoint of, a conversation about contemporary architectural discourse. I don't know if you've read it, you might want to read it. Brian Dillon's Ruin Lust comes to mind with your project on one standpoint, thinking about the decaying qualities of the architecture, but then you're getting into like Mario Carpo's First Digital Turn and Second Digital Turn, thinking about, the interior and the exterior and, the resolution of this veil basically, and the dissolution between it. And I think it's a really great expression of a lot of different ideologies in contemporary discourse of architecture right now. And it's exciting to see someone apply those very effectively to a project, right? It's not just the kind of neoliberalist way that we think about architecture. But something I did want to comment on, which Mr. Edmond also did touch on, is the articulation of that roof deck area and kind of how it comes to meet the very surface-like qualities. And I think like refining the solidity of what's inside and its relationship to the veil. Because right now when they come very close, like at the top, it's kind of ruining the surface-like qualities of what you're trying to achieve. I don't know if that's, obviously there's also the programmatic and functionality requirements of the architecture, but I think if studying that relationship to really understand, right, that this thing that's coming up and not terminating is like a surface, and having the separation between the inside and the outside, I think it'll further the like reading of what your intent is from the building. That was my only big comment, but I'm super excited about this project. I really appreciate the direction that you've been going and kind of the articulate thoughtfulness about a really refined architecture. So I'm in support. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benazzi. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some questions. All the renderings, and I think Mr. Benezzi touched on this on an earlier presentation in this meeting. All these renderings have a slightly different, more than slightly different color. I'm sure part of that is shadowing, but I'd like a clearer understanding. Is the steel going to be a more silvery color or a more gray, black, dark tone? Yeah, I'd like to get a better understanding of the color, the color and the intensity of the colors on this building.
It's interesting you bring this up because we know, especially after Gordon Square and the discussion of the scale of the building, and was a lighter color more appropriate. We really looked at, and I apologize that I don't have better photos of this, but at the entryway to the Electric Gardens building, which has the exact same material, there's a really unique quality to this, which we think will actually be exaggerated to a good effect on this building, in that material can look very dark if it's in shadow, and when the sun hits it, it can actually go very, not silver, but a much lighter color. So it has a nuance to it, which again, with the sort of accentuation of the panels, they will catch different light in different ways. That we think that this, while again, these images are kind of flawed in many ways, and that we can't capture the nuance of what that material can do. The answer to your question is yes, right? It is dark, it is light, it is a lot of things, and it's a very natural material. And I think that, in some ways what we did is as the architects on the board, or maybe you guys, because you've looked at renderings for so long, you take a sample of that material, you put it into these images, and the different lighting situations in the renderings themselves are going to capture, it's a little more silver, it's a little darker. I think that actually there is some level of accurate representation in that this building will, I think, have different lives in different lights, which I think it's a way that even this simple expression can be very dynamic. It will be very dynamic.
Okay, thank you. There are some trees to the north on the other side of the railroad tracks there. They're pretty tall, mature trees.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that probably one of the things that's going to be a draw for tenants would be Lakeview. So I just wanted to find out if there was plans for you to try to have those trees removed, or how you plan to deal with that.
Adam, I'll let you take that one, buddy.
Yeah, that's a little bit, obviously that's not our land. That would be something we'd have to work through with the Metro Parks. So it's not to say that we wouldn't explore that. It's something that we would consider and kind of talk through with them, but ultimately it would be their decision.
Let's see. As far as any kind of noise mitigation from the railroad, is that possible? I used to live very close to railroad tracks, and it's pretty noisy. Now, granted, this train doesn't come through that often, but and it also shook my house. So I was just wondering how you or have you been dealing with that already with the Shoreway building?
Obviously, the existing Shoreway building, one of the saving graces is they put very good windows in it. It's interesting you speak to that because those are pretty active freight lines. We do have an acoustical engineer on the project. We've actually set up acoustical testing, acoustical meters on the site and in the existing Shoreway building to get both the sound level, but also the vibration frequency, and are working with the structural engineers so they'll actually tune the structure to not resonate the vibrations that the trains give off. The different, I mean, we had to sit there and I think we did it all day trying to get the different weights of trains coming through and what those vibrations were into the ground. So it is a very active concern of the project, and making sure that we're mitigating that any way that we can, because it can be obtrusive.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I have some concerns about this building. I'm not, I'm not excited about the height. I would be probably willing to embrace a tall building in that location, because it is kind of separate from everything else. But there's things about this design that doesn't, I don't think it's to the level where I would want to make that concession. I find the top of the building, as Mr. Dreyer said, somewhat unresolved. Having these vertical elements just reach out into the sky makes it look like it's either unfinished or something tragic happened. And I'm also concerned about the color on the north side of the building, which faces the Shoreway, and a lot of people from either Edgewater or the Shoreway are gonna. That is how they're gonna respond to this building, is from that view. On the north side of the building, it doesn't get any sun, so it's going to always be very dark. And we have a number of dark buildings. I can think of one in Ohio City right now that it just has a kind of a foreboding look. And I think for that, and I'm concerned about trees. I think we've lost too many trees with these developments already, and I hate to see any more trees threatened. So those are my comments. I mean, there's some things I'm happy about. I'm glad we have more than one-to-one parking. I'm glad that you've addressed the truck loading dock so that it minimizes the impact to the neighborhood. But I'm hesitant to support the additional height without a design that I think is more pleasing, especially from the Shoreway. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given the expression of various commission members with regard to the representation of the design, especially at the roof level, I'd just like to express that I like the free form nature of those vertical elements being unresolved. And I understand the nature of the design, and I think this is a wonderful intersection of art and architecture. And it's just going to be a wonderful addition to the Battery Park Shoreway area. I think that our motion, when that comes, ought to include support for any variances that are required for this project. I would like the applicant to explain specifically what the variance on the south side setback would be, so that we know specifically the nature of that variance, so we can express our support.
I'd be happy to. I mean, currently with our numbers, as Adam spoke to, the FAR variance that we will be required. Currently, it's 0.5 to 1. And again, Adam, I don't know, Adam Davenport, I don't know if there's a fine tuning of what actually falls under that FAR, if it's just residential floor area, or, but again, we're the total FAR of the project, including all of the parking, will be about 4.8 to 1. The setbacks, the rear yard, I think it's calculated off the height of the building. It would require a 57-foot setback. We'll be looking for a reduction of that down to 10 feet or less. And then the height itself, the base zone is 115 feet. I think, again, I'd like to work with Adam to make sure exactly how this height will be calculated, if there's architectural elements or, again, mechanical overruns and so forth, how those will be included, because I don't want to confuse anybody or have to come back and put you guys through this again. So I think we're looking for an additional 20 to 25 feet, depending on how that's all calculated.
Okay, well, that resolves things for me, so I still would very much be in support of all of the required variances for this project. Thank you.
I think I'll just insert my comments here. I don't know if I can, I'll make them short because I don't want to repeat much of everything that has been said. I think this is a very handsome building. I appreciate the intentionality you're doing with the architecture. My only comment is similar to Mr. Edmund, and I apologize, I forgot to note who also made the comment. I think Mr. Bonazzi is the roof level and the roof deck roof, and how that it breaks, in my opinion, it breaks down your architectural language by having it connect in such a main elevation as you do, specifically on the north. So that's my comments. I would appreciate you studying that more, because I think it's not strengthening your design. It's like, sort of weakening the top of your design.
I'll just say I appreciate that. I appreciate these comments. I can see it now. It's like I can see what you guys are seeing. It's funny, you stare at these projects and for so long, and right, there's rational reasons why this is happening, but I can see it. It's like we will definitely look at how we can strengthen that aspect of the project.
Well, we appreciate you being open to feedback. Mr. Edmonds, would you have additional comments, or would you like to make a motion?
Actually, I have a comment and then I'll make a motion. And my comment relates to your comment, Madam Chair. And there is a subtlety that I didn't notice earlier that I did as I continue to look through the facades. And it appears that on the south facade, the height of the vertical extensions varies from higher at the west end to a little lower at the east end. I think doing that, but you're not doing that on the north facade. And I think if you did do that on the north facade, it would really strengthen that facade and go, it would be a good step toward alleviating that issue that Julie and I both identified. So that may be something to consider looking at as you continue to refine, particularly the north facade, is that changing in elevation. It really makes that gesture look intentional and gives it some energy, I think, and might help deconflict that issue with the rooftop roof. So that being said, I would like to make a motion to approve the project as submitted, with the recommendation of the approval of the required zoning ordinances and the condition that the proposer continue to work with planning on ongoing traffic study issues.
I request to study the roof deck roof configuration also to your, recommend studying the roof deck roof configuration to your motion.
Yes, please add that. Thank you.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second, Director Huang.
Thank you, Director Huang. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, Mr. Brancatelli has had his hand raised for a while. He's back with us after we lost him.
Thank you. Mr. Brunges, Mr. Brancatelli, did you have any additional comments, or left up?
I appreciate it, and sorry for the misstep. I don't have power right now, so I knew I shouldn't have spoke against HB6. No, a lot of the points that I was going to make were brought up in the additional discussion as we move forward, and just to reiterate the desire, as Councilwoman Spencer mentioned, about resolving the traffic engineering with planning, and just also that point of that cut through with those parcels 16 and 20, making sure that we address that to make sure we don't create any additional harm, and just remind some of my members, we talk about folks who've been there long term. These buildings, the previous buildings that were occupied were industrial and had a very dense population of a workforce. And there always has been, or historically had been, industrial traffic going in and out of that area. I think as we introduce residential, studying those traffic patterns and kind of reorienting them is significantly important. So, so thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me, and most of my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? All right, Mr. Brendes, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson,
No.
Mr. Benezzi,
Yes.
Mr. Brancatelli,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia, Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmond,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes 7-1.
Thank you for the summary. We look forward to seeing this project progress.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now move on to our next applicant, located at 1975 Ford Avenue. This is for concept plan review. Correct? Yes, okay.
That is correct. So no action will be taken. This is for feedback only.
I'd like to welcome the applicant. Please unmute your mic and tell us about your project.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Kevin Dreyfus Wells, RDL Architects. I am joined today. We have Chad Boston from my office, and also representing the owner, we have Russell Baruch and Alexis Booth from Baruch Development. Russell, would you like to say anything briefly? Or?
Yes. So let me just get the video going. Okay, thank you. Can you all hear? Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Almost good afternoon. Three short comments and then pass it back to Kevin. You all probably will recall a year ago or so, we brought a prior incarnation of this project to this commission. And now we're back with a different design, a different team, and a new architect, RDL Architect, represented by Kevin here and Chad. This project, as you'll see, is quite different than the prior version. I am very excited about it. I happen to believe, while it is very modest in size at only 6 apartments, that be that as it may, it would be quite accretive to the street in general, beneficial to Hessler, and also enhance quite nicely the adjoining 1975 Hessler Ford building, rather, that you again saw in the past, and the historic renovation we did to it. I think it makes a very nice companion. And the only other note I want to make, it'll sound like a sidestep, is in preparing, I saw some correspondence, and one of the residents opined that this particular project in front of you, he felt would be incompatible with some future possible Hessler Street Festival or Street Fair. I myself loved that fair, been many times. I see no reason for incompatibility. And in fact, would be more than happy to talk to whomever the street fair organizers might be in the future when it's resuscitated, about potentially using our new parking lot, which you'll see in the slides to come, if that's useful for ticket sales or any manner of ways to be cooperative and help this fair come back online. So back to the main plot. That's why we're here. And let me give it to Kevin Dreyfus Wells from RDL Architects.
All right, thank you. And next slide. So this is, I'm saying, I'm sure very familiar to folks that were here for the previous iteration. The highlighted area shows both the two previous renovation projects that were completed and were approved by this commission, the two buildings along Ford Drive, as well as the open space behind where this project is proposed. Next slide. Hessler Road in aerial context, again, we're in the lower left there in the space that's shown as parking on Hessler Road. Next slide. And just a quick bit of an analysis, and as we'll look in the context photos later, one of the things that makes Hessler so special is the broad variety of types of buildings and sizes of buildings. You know, the blue buildings are buildings much like 1975 Ford that we're butting up against, that are 2 full stories plus a 3rd story up in their attic. I think most of those are occupied. Some may be just attic storage space, but a fairly typical Cleveland single family and double. And then the other 50% or more of the projects are bigger projects that are bigger in scale, 3, 4, 4.5 or 5 stories, depending on how you count it. Some of them very broad in how they face the street. Next slide. And just a very similar kind of wonderful diversity in everything. You know, most of these buildings can find a detail or a style that's like nothing else elsewhere on the street. This is not Colonial Williamsburg, where every building is, you know, all the same material and style and detailing. There's just a terrific amount of variety. Next slide. You know, including buildings in our neighborhood that are, you know, much taller, much broader. We are, you know, certainly fitting into the lower end of that scale, but I think we have a good place there. Next slide. This is the site, our neighbor to the east on the left side, and again, the duplex house with 2 entrances, 2 apartments, the parking area in the middle, and then 1975 Ford. It's Ford Avenue frontage on the upper right. On the lower right is its side that faces Hessler. 1975 Ford, from what we can tell from Sanborn maps, was built in about 1905 and really has been there in that same configuration with service, utility, yard space behind it. There was a garage there which was demolished earlier with Landmark's approval. Next slide. Some views interior to the lot. You can see the back porch in the upper left of 1981 Ford, which will butt up against the proposed new parking lot. And then lower left is perhaps the most germane. That is the rear side of 1975 Ford. And because you're going to see a building that comes up against that, just to point out a couple of things, you see a 12-foot wall on the left side that has a couple of air conditioning condenser units. That is actually the only place where the new construction will physically touch the existing building. We are proposing to extend the roof just above that across to our building, but otherwise that existing back face of the building facade, those windows and that siding are all still open and exposed to view. What you do see in the middle of that, there is a wood fire escape stair and door that replaced what used to be a window. And there's a small 50 square foot porch. The porch fabric, we think the porch location and size is what it is, but it looks like the porch has been replaced. And speaking with building and housing and fire department officials, they've agreed that that fire escape is really not providing any meaningful safety that they'd like to see retained. So we do propose to remove that fire escape and to replace that existing porch with a new, slightly broader porch that will connect the 2 buildings. Next slide. This is the previous proposal. This is came before you and was approved. That at the time that included the 2 other buildings. Those have now been completed. But that was a project that started as a 4-story, 24-unit building, and then what was approved was a 12-unit, 3-story building. Next slide. This is what that proposal looked like, 3-story with the roof added, as a volume completely on top of that. I'll say that while we were not involved with this project, we certainly made a very concerted effort to listen to all of the input that came as part of that project's development, both through landmarks and design review, and was discussed in other formats and found out as much as we could. So we very much tried to respond in our new proposal to the concerns that came up there. Next slide. And this is what that was. So that was a project that was a little bit taller than what we're proposing. Next slide. And one more. So just as a comparison between what was approved and what we're proposing, that was 12 studio units that required parking variances. This is proposed to be 6 3-bedroom units, which is very consistent with the types of units that are in the building or in the neighborhood now. We think it's more flexible to be operated and change over time depending on what the market might be. Our proposal is about 14 feet shorter than what the previous one. Our proposal is pretty much at the same height and scale as all of the smallest buildings in the project. We've looked very carefully in design to try and be compatible with scale and proportion of a lot of other buildings on the street. Zoning would allow for this to be a 60-foot height. Again, we're at 35 feet. There's a building directly across the street that's 4.5 or 5 stories, depending on how you count it, and 120 feet wide. We've come up with a proposal that, well, the previous proposal had its zoning variances approved. Our project, we do not believe, although we have not yet gone through the zoning administrator for formal review, believe really what's only needed is a very similar parking screening variance between a rear parking lot and adjacent properties not visible from the public way. We can talk about that a little more. Next slide. Looking at the Secretary of Interior standards, we've specifically looked at those that relate to new additions, make sure we're impacting or adding on to 1975 Ford in a way that's on the secondary facade, providing a break so it's clear what's new and what's old, and limiting that amount of connection, not addressing any features that we believe are the significant historic character of the building. We are distinguishing our detailing a little bit from that 1975 Ford. I would say that if it weren't for the previous history, we might lean towards something that was a little more towards the contemporary side, but based on what we've heard from neighborhood feedback, that we have probably erred a little bit on the side of it being more conservative, that we've heard loud and clear that people want this new construction to be as inobtrusive as it can be. We did have a community meeting to review this on the 26th, and then Euclid Corridor last week. Next slide. So this is the proposal. Again, 3 stories. That yellow is 1975 Ford, and you can see there's just that 12-foot section where those buildings connect. We have kept the curb cut essentially where the curb cut is now. There is a entry court between the buildings. There's actually no physical interior connection to walk from the existing 1975 Ford into the new units. There are 2 ground floor units that each have independent entrances, and then 4 upper floor units, 2 on the second, 2 on the 3rd floor, that have an entry door and stair that lets them walk up to those units directly. This provides 6 parking units, or 6 parking spaces, 1 per unit, which is what zoning requires. and also has the benefit of really providing the only fully accessible apartment and parking that exists on the street that we know of. The rear unit will be adaptable. The front will be an accessible one. We've tucked in a ramp behind the front screening element that we'll show in just a second. We know that there are stormwater concerns broadly through the neighborhood. We certainly will deal with and treat the stormwater on this site in accordance with what's required and manage that. We really don't have any control over stormwater elsewhere from other property owners, but don't think that's necessarily related to what we're doing here. Next slide. So ground floor plan, it's a two units, one front, one back. There are limited windows on the back side of that because of our proximity to the other buildings. So we're keeping windows out of areas that are required to have a fire rated wall. So that's the reason for that notch at the back that helps us bring in plenty of light without having to find a way to fire rate a window. So the entry sequence, you walk in through a screen wall. There's the opportunity to walk up the ramp to a porch, up about 5 steps to a common terrace for use by all residents, another 5 steps to a porch that's essentially at the same location and height as the previously existing porch, letting those residents come into that existing building as they always have. Next slide, and we can skip through the next couple floor plans to the elevation. So this is what's proposed. We're actually shorter than 1975 Ford. We are keeping a gable protruding from the front with a porch that very much is similar in width and profile, both to the side elevation of 1975 Ford and the front elevation of a lot of the neighboring single family and duplex homes down the street. That porch projects. You can see there's a screen wall screening the accessible ramp and a trellis that bridges between those two existing and the new building, and then a mansard type roof profile at the top that conceals the 3rd floor. It'll be a vertical floor height, vertical wall behind that. We heard a lot of comment from Euclid Corridor Design Review on that element with a desire to see if we can slope that back and really make that more of a true mansard. We talked also about the other possibilities of just treating that as a vertical flat wall with no roof, or treating that as it was previously with a roof volume as a hat on top of those 3 stories. We feel that this is the approach that most closely tucks that upper story out of scale and fits into the neighborhood. We asked the question to Design Review whether they would prefer the other 2 approaches of a flat wall or a roof volume placed on top, and heard fairly clearly that they would like us to continue pursuing this. Next slide. We are trying to maintain very similar materials and color palettes to 1975 Ford in most cases. Was a comment on that rear stair element that sort of pokes up between the 2 buildings. We're looking at bring that more into the roof volume. We think that's certainly doable. And we are, next slide. This is the side elevation. Also heard the comment of trying to transition and maintain more continuity as the brick changes to siding. So we're looking at kind of continuing those horizontal lines across, even though we're really trying to focus the investment on the portion. Sure we have enough in the budget to afford quality materials, interesting details, at the right scale facing the street, but think and, well, in fact, know that we can do some things to bring a little more continuity across that side elevation. Next slide. Some perspective views. We are in process of looking at the possibility of adjusting that slope to be a little bit steeper. That has some certainly impacts on the interior space of the apartment, has some structural framing complications that will bring their own challenges, but we're certainly looking very diligently to see what we can accomplish and understand, and how that can make the project stronger if we're able to do so. Next slide. Next slide. Between the two buildings, you will see in the back of the porch, there's a railing that we had offered, a walkway across from the existing building to replace the old fire escape into the new stair. The building and fire officials said they actually did not want to see that, so we're going to transition that to a roof and not have a railing there, but otherwise shows what's intended. The front units each have a full porch, very consistent with what the kinds of porches other folks have down the street. Next slide. Next slide. And just showing our intent in terms of how that fits into the scale of the street, and we think pulling that roof slope back more, if we can accomplish it, will even strengthen that further. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And looking at continuing what we see on the front in some way a little bit further down the side. I think I forgot to mention that trash is all managed in the rear of the site, so nothing at the front. There's a trash enclosure towards the back. Next slide. And this is a view that you would only see if, in two conditions: one, if you walked up on top of the uptown garage and looked directly at the building, and two, if the adjacent property owner demolished a garage that's actually where that gray footprint is that we've just hidden from view to show that view. But see the trash enclosure kind of tucked into the left side of that view, the entrance to just the rear lower level unit at the back, and some idea of the treatment of that rear facade. We're limiting windows on a portion of that due to code and fire resistance requirements. Next. And then one more for materials. Just to point out, the existing 1975 Ford has a shake siding, but it's a shake siding that from a distance appears much more like a lap siding, that the joints between shakes are very tight, and many layers of paint have probably made those joints even tighter. They have a consistent bottom line. So we're using lap siding more for the majority of that, but are introducing a little shake just in accent areas. And in many cases using the same paint colors, roof colors, matching brick color to what's shown or what's existing in 1975 Ford. And then to point out that arched window is really with the intent of maximizing the daylight for that third floor unit while still allowing us to have a gable, but we may look also at whether we can step down the sides of that window. And go back to the previous slide, and looking forward to everyone's comments and questions.
Thank you. For the presentation, we will begin with a summary of the Design Review Committee's comments. Mr. Brunches?
I'll jump in. Thank you, Madam Chair. It was seen by the Euclid Corridor Design Review Committee as a concept last week, and there was a lot of conversation about the design and consistency as well as infrastructure. And so they had some recommendations or suggestions, which was to do stormwater and parking studies for the site, possible addition of gardens or landscaping for interest, and stormwater retention. Changes to the roofline on Hessler and other sides, as Kevin mentioned, continuity on all sides of the building with the design, and review of the materiality, either consistently modern or historic.
Excellent. Thank you for the summary and the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to have Jessica first go over a summary of the community feedback before the staff report.
Okay, thank you.
So we did circulate the community response to commission members, and I'll summarize those here. Prior to the design review meeting on the 3rd, we received one statement from a resident of Hessler Road and one from the Hessler Neighborhood Association as representing a majority of Hessler community members in opposition to the project. This week, we received 4 statements from residents and one from the Hessler Neighborhood Association in opposition to the new proposal. They identified concerns for the existing infrastructure being able to handle a large addition and were against a building of any kind in that space. Design concerns included the statement that the design is not appropriate in massing and design for the historic district, finding the massing not to be in line with the neighboring homes, and the roofline design not to be reflective of or in keeping with the architecture in the district. Community concerns focused on the existing stormwater management issues, impacts to the tree canopy, damage to historic street and sidewalks due to large delivery and construction vehicles, and parking concerns for the number of proposed new tenants along with existing residents.
Okay, thank you for that summary of the comments. Now move on to staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've been looking at this using the Secretary of the Interior standards, and there were some items that came up through other review. So we'll say that 1975 Ford was originally built as a single-family home, but for the past 70 years, it has been a boarding house, apartments, multifamily use building. It has been this latter use longer than it was a single-family home, so this addition is appropriate use as a multifamily addition, given the history of multifamily use. There is minimal impact on the original house, as this appears at the rear of the building and attaching to probably a later addition. And based upon what they have shown us, that this could be reversible if it was removed in the future. However, we will still need to see more detail on how those 2 buildings will connect. The massing and the proposed materials are appropriate. The first 2 floors are appropriate in design, but the mansard roof form is not appropriate for the district. As this is an apartment building, it should draw more inspiration from the surrounding apartment buildings while giving nods to the single-family homes. Feel that squaring the 3rd floor on the sides to reflect that. The front gable could move higher. More traditional picture window for design continuity. All roof materials should be the same color, and potentially adding landscaping between the 2 Ford Road properties, which would help with stormwater management. A tree preservation plan will need to be submitted, as well as a determination for stormwater management as well as a part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. We'll now open the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Director Wong.
Thank you, Chair Trott. I'll just start off with some brief comments, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the dialogue. I think the first is I want to acknowledge that there is history here, and that this is the second time that the applicant is coming forward. I find it hard to argue against a 6-unit building or structure that is in this mass, and I also think that the 3-bedroom apartments, at the Planning Commission, we've had a lot of discussion around how there's a huge influx of the studio 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments. And so having the 3-bedroom apartment typology, conceptually speaking, does reflect much more flexibility, whether to house families or, likely students here on this street. But I think it fits sort of that communal living that is a part of the Hessler culture, as far as I understand it, getting to know the district a little more. I do think that part of what makes Hessler special is the culture and the street fair and the community. And I don't necessarily see the new construction being a zero-sum game when it comes to thinking about being able to retain the culture as well as this new proposal for development. And so I think those are just my comments, my thoughts. From a traffic engineering perspective, it is a one-way street. So one of the other directors and I have been exploring, can we make the front part, the entryway, two-way temporarily during construction to allow for trucks to back in and out rather than, going all the way down the brick road and onto the wood block road. However, that's something we'd have to explore further with traffic engineering to see if that in itself is a safe action. And I'm just aware that there are many concerns from the community members around the care and the process. I am curious what the rest of the commission thinks about the design and particularly the roof, as Carl had noted. But overall, I again, want to state that I find it hard to argue against a 6-unit building that, fits the massing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Dryer?
Thank you. I think I like this overall design much better than the previous building. I will say that. My concerns are the mansard roof. I think I don't mean this to be as drastic as it sounds, but I think it's kind of a failure. I don't think it looks good. I don't think it does anything for the building. If you want a mansard roof, make it a real mansard roof. But I don't find it. I just don't think it looks good. I also don't like the standing seal, the steel metal roof on top of the dormers, and I don't know why on the side it looks as if the shingles go to a different color. That's a confusing thing. I think my biggest problem with this is what you're calling the connector. It really doesn't connect to anything, first of all. And I really think, this is such a densely populated area that even those little notches between the buildings are very, very important to, I think, building, really a more human scaled or somehow street. And so I really think you're building a big building now on the corner. That's what you're essentially doing, and I think that's a big mistake. My final comment is not so much a landmarks thing, but should this project go forward, I'm assuming it'll be in the ground over the next year. There also is another construction project being planned across the street, the Ford Road Garage that's owned by UCI. I believe is scheduled to be torn down, and they're going to build a parking lot over the next year. The city also is planning next year a full rehab of Hessler, which means that they're rebuilding it from the top, well, not from the top, from the bottom up. So I would just sort of implore all the partners involved. You've really got to work together, because there's no way 3 major construction projects at the same time would be chaos. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Dryer. Mr. Edmond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo Mr. Dryer's comments about all of the comments, but particularly the sort of niche public spaces, quasi-public spaces that I think are really important to that vitality of the street front and the activity between private and public spaces. But even more so, his comments about the roof. I do think this is a significant improvement from the previous submission in the form and massing, but also just in having the 6 3-bedroom units. But I definitely think the mansard roof is a sort of a failed compromise. Honestly, I would rather see the wall go straight up and have a flat roof. There's certainly precedent for that nearby with apartment buildings. And yeah, also the change to it looks like painted shingles, I think is weird. So I would either it's really a mansard roof and it has a meaningful slope to it, or it's just not, and the wall goes up and it's a flat roof. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmond. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo the comments of Commissioner Dreyer and Commissioner Edmonds regarding the mansard roof and some of the other elements of this project. You know, I agree with Mr. Dreyer. I think those little spaces between the buildings are extremely important here. I think that's one of the things about Cleveland that makes it unique and wonderful is we have some breathing room between structures. I also think that's especially important here because the Ford Road house is a historic house, and I think it deserves to stand alone. I commend the applicant in coordinating the colors and giving us some warm colors and earth tones as opposed to the grays that we've been seeing. I am very concerned about the other major projects that are going to be taking place in this area. It seems to be a very big concern of the residents. And I think it's very important that these projects are at least coordinated, if not, you know, reviewed with a little more discrimination here. My other concern is regarding the programming and the parking. We've gone from the need for 12 parking spaces to, even though the requirement is 6 because it's 6 units, there's going to be 18 residents here. You know, they usually rent these places out for $1,000 a month to students, and I'm sure that's, you know, it's unlikely that there's going to be a family. It's probably going to be students. So that's something that really needs to be scrutinized. And I have one last comment. We've gotten a lot of feedback and basically pushback from the neighborhood, and you know, although it can be uncomfortable to navigate between the developer and the neighborhood, I have to say, you know, it's wonderful that we have neighbors who are active and involved and who really love and embrace their neighborhood. We just had an election where we had a 20% turnout. So, you know, I think indifference and maybe cynicism is really something that is very, very much a part of the city of Cleveland. So, you know, as much as it's uncomfortable dealing with the neighbors, I have to say we need to welcome and embrace their input. So those are my comments, and that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I think I'll just conclude, not seeing any other hands with my comments. I do appreciate and applaud the development team to continue to try to bring this project in scale with the neighborhood and reducing the number of units. I do not like the mansard roof, and most importantly, the transition from the shingle material on the front to the additional lap siding on the sides. So let's, I would commit to one and do it right for the building because they are so visible with each other. My only other comment would be it might be nice to explore something like permeable pavers to really embrace the sustainability of the project, address the stormwater, and also allow the materiality of this rear parking lot to work with the beautiful roads in this specific area. And I think those are my only unique comments that I have to make. Director Wong.
Thank you. And I appreciate your comments, Michelle, to Member Anderson. I'm curious, and I don't know if this is an appropriate question to ask. So to the chair, feel free to strike it if not. But I think given that there has been a lot of conversation about this particular parcel before, and there is history here, I think it would be helpful for everybody, whether the developer and the neighbors, to understand, should the developer and the architect continue forward. Again, if this is an inappropriate question, feel free to strike it. But I think that it would want to just make sure that we are kind of giving the right sort of pathways forward here, given the history. Thank you.
An interesting comment. I don't think it's inappropriate, but in clarity of our feedback, is that what you're referring to? Just to clarify that I'm understanding your question.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, is it purely a design issue, or is there like are people against, are other members against the actual concept of adding this particular schematic layout? I don't know if that's helps at all.
Sure, no,
Yeah.
that does. I don't know if anyone has, feedback. We've heard from many of the commission members. If any additional people want to give feedback of if you're in support of the project or are not in support of this project based on what you see. Is that
And
what
I
you're
just, yeah, I just want to acknowledge that even though we're not taking action today, is the nature of some of the comments provided purely just about design? Or is anyone sort of out against the concept and the schematic? I think it would be helpful to hear some more about that.
Thank you for pulling on that, string. I think that's a great one to clarify. Mr. Brancatelli, did you want to give feedback on that comment or question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the notion of putting 6 additional units here is certainly, I certainly support that idea. I think it's not inappropriate to have that kind of density, and the fact that they lowered the density from the original presentations down to 6. And as the director noted, having some 3-bedroom units in there makes it much more functional. So from the project standpoint, I think going further down the path of looking at 6 units here, but really trying to address the mansard roof issue, and then trying to address that, connecting it to 1975 Ford, or whether we keep a separation there. I think there's plenty of opportunity to go back and look at this. Part of the question I was going to ask is, does this go back to the Euclid design review? Is that where we take this up next? Since there was no formal action at the last meeting, going back with the input from our commission members and the director to try and address some of the issues that were raised. The issue around damaging around parking and during construction, there's lots of precedent for the city to really document the current conditions to make sure that no additional harm gets done through a construction process. And I think the notion of having some 2-way traffic, if temporary, to make sure that we don't do any harm to the truly historic Hessler area is important. So those are my general in response to the director's question of going back to supporting the general concept and going back to the Euclid design review to get that input so that they can continue down this path. And it's not an absolute no. It's like, here's the concerns that we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brancatelli. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think certainly any property owner has the right to develop that property within the zoning requirements and rules and regulations of the Department of Building and Housing. And so I would support the development of these 6 units. I think the applicant needs to understand that the local design review committee is advisory to this commission. And it's the views of the commission that will dictate whether this project gets approved in its current concept or not. I think personally that the design of a 6-unit apartment building should take its cues from the apartment buildings that are on Hessler, as opposed to 1975 Ford. So that might be counter to the input that they received from the design review committee, but I think that would be most appropriate. And divorcing this addition from 1975 Ford, I think would be the best solution, and not try to integrate it into that historic structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland. Mr. Clicchia?
Thank you. I think some of the comments, the questions I wanted to ask were covered by the last two commission members. But one of my issues, I think, we keep talking about density, and I think obviously automatically refers to structural density of additional buildings in a historical neighborhood. But in this case, I'm seeing like a human density that we're adding 18 people potentially to a very fragile historical neighborhood that will require parking. And I suspect that this is more of a development project similar to what's going on in University Circle. And it's not really adding anything, in my opinion, to the historical neighborhood itself. I think that these will be spaces rented to students and who will be transitory and therefore not really adding something to a permanent historical neighborhood. So I think one of my issues is that we're isolating a neighborhood more than uniting it to an existing concept. That's it for me.
Thank you for that feedback and those new comments. Mr. Edmund?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the director's question, I definitely support the concept. I think there are architectural refinements needed. I really like the idea that Mr. Strickland also and a couple others articulated of really looking more to the apartment buildings as precedent and separating it rather than sort of pretending it's just an addition to a house. So, but yes, I support the concept. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmund. Mr. Bonazzi?
I didn't expect to be next. No, since we're all giving our feedback on the applicability of this concept, it is a twofold duality, right? On the one hand, you have the difficulties of the current density when you talk about, as Mr. Lord have mercy on my brain today, as Mr. Clicchia pointed out, adding 18 students is a kind of a toll from a density standpoint, but as Mr. Strickland pointed out, anyone has the right to, develop their property, regardless of the property has been vacant for 60 years or however many years it's been vacant, right? Whoever owns it does have that right. So when it comes to the development, I'm supportive of, developing the property. But when it comes to the architectural, which I've kind of let everyone else echo each other, I think this is a perfect example of taking too much consideration contextually as to what your neighbor is, rather than seeing, this, how do I, it's a good metaphor for this, rather than seeing what the program is that you're trying to accomplish and taking cues from that, and then also the external cues. This is quite literally copy and pasting what's next door onto a new development out of the hope that it will please the community, rather than developing something that is unique and still new, but still feels integral to this road. So to me, this is more of a facsimile rather than a genuine contribution to what the neighborhood wants to be. And that comes in a lot of standpoints. The exact copying of architectural details, the exact copying of color, and then on top of that, this I was about to be obscene. This very not working roof. It's a very nice way of putting it. So in that standpoint, I think in everyone's attempt to be cautious about the community, we've foregone the idea of, this is still a new development that is a new programmatic piece in the neighborhood, and it should be treated as such. I think in that sense, you might want to take another stab at what you're presenting, because this has felt like, ironically, this was my first project from when I joined the Landmarks Commission, was Hessler Road. It was like 2 years ago now. And even then it was a layered conversation. It was a conversation layered on top of a conversation, layered on top of a conversation. And I think we've gotten to a point now where we've layered so many times, maybe it's time to take a little shovel, cut away at all those conversations and notions and preconceptions of what we have about this project, and look at it with a fresh set of eyes. We said that last week with another project. It was the demolition of that house. You know, there's a lot of new people in this commission, and you know, a lot of conversations have just kind of been pushed forward, and I think it's this particular project could really benefit from just a new perspective. Not saying that you forego every, you know, obviously don't take my existentialism as you forego everything that has been said about this, but you give it a little refresh. So that's my opinion on where this project is at. I don't know if that's helpful. I hope it is. But that's all I have for now. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, do you have additional new comments or?
Yes, I'll try to make it brief. I think the developer can legally put in 6 3-bedroom apartments there. I think that's an allowable use, but I think we just have to recognize that you know, it's going to be a higher density than what we discussed before, and you know, we got to think about, you know, trash pickup and parking and, you know, and the other related concerns that go along with that. And I think that's something that, you know, needs to be acknowledged regardless of what the zoning codes stipulate. So those are my basic comments.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Klickia, do you have new comments or is your hand still left up? Giancarlo?
Yes, thank you. Very briefly, I mean, we looked at this project for quite a while, and we seem to be obviously struggling with it. As Mr. Bonassi and Michelle have commented, to me, architecturally, it needs some work. It needs some effort to blend in with an historical neighborhood, to accommodate the historical needs of that neighborhood. And some of the comments that the people have been making, and it should not be a struggle, is what I'm saying. I think we should look at something, and obviously there's something that needs to be done there. The developer does have the right to do a project on his property. But to me, it seems more part of University Circle than it does a part of Hessler, the historical old, kind of a delicate street, really. Even the street itself has some issues, of course. And yeah, I think a greater effort should be made to create something unique, something special, something, again, I keep saying it and I said it before, something that our new generation, 80 or 90 years from now, can be proud of. Instead of wondering, like, you know, why was that put there? I think we need a bigger effort of creativity, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klickia. Well, since this was a concept plan review, I'd like to ask the applicant, do you feel like you received enough feedback to continue the development of your project?
Thanks everyone for the feedback. We certainly have got some good feedback and some things we can work on. I do want to just ask for a clarification specific to the comment about how this building adjoins or connects to or doesn't connect to 1975 Ford. You know, we certainly appreciate what interstitial spaces do there. We've got a space between those buildings currently that would be, you know, 20 feet wide between the face of the buildings and go back 30 feet to the back wall of the building. It's a space that we think can add to, be a space that residents can use and add to the life of the street. Just to be clear, it sounds like we're hearing that there are at least some members of the commission suggesting that we separate this building with a physical gap from 1975 Ford. You know, to the point of that, because this is connected and because it's positioned against 1975 Ford, that helps us with zoning and not needing side yard, rear yard variances. It provides extra space for parking by adding 2 additional spaces alongside the drive. So the to move it away would require variances that were supported and approved for the previous project. It would negatively impact parking. I guess we're wondering if that, that extra 10 feet of space between the back of the old service addition and the side of the building, it was quite a ways back and wouldn't be seen. Would the commission support, in the same way you did on the previous project, support variances for that separation? Or, are we wondering how much we're really accomplishing by providing a small separation and causing some other cascading effects? Obviously, projects need to pencil, and number of parking spaces and number of units is part of how we got where we are.
Sure, no, that's a great question, and makes sense. You're asking for clarity. I think this is probably where your renderings and straight elevations are not helping you, they're hurting you. I think the plan articulates it better in my opinion. I personally feel that it's set back far enough that I don't think it's going to read like it did on the rendering that was on the screen. With that being said, though, I think the continuation of color and materiality does make it feel like one large building where you have the opportunity to play off the layering that this neighborhood, along with the others around it, that have this very unique layering quality that allows things to stand alone and not feel like they're fully connected sometimes. And I think my personal opinion is if you did or we look at the design of the facility and used some different materiality, that might also lessen the presence of that connector. So that's my personal opinion. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to go back and try to recall the presentation, but that bump out on 1975 Ford, is that 1 story or 2 story?
It's a little of both. It's one story at the bottom and then 2 stories set 5 feet back. So just to avoid a place for leaves and trash and snow to collect, we are proposing to extend that across. We could very well just extend the 1-story roof and leave a bigger visual gap, so long as we can.
Yeah, as long as you're not
get a volunteer to rake it on a regular.
As long as you're not creating a maintenance headache for yourself, I think that if it was just a 1-story connection, and as the chairwoman said, it's set back far enough, I think that the elevations don't really adequately or in terms of scale reflect how far of a setback that is. Visually from the street, I think they look more divorced. And so either way, I would support a variance if you disconnected the buildings in terms of side setback, or if it was just a simple 1-story link recessed that far back. I think that would be fine as well. But I think the materiality on the addition on the new building should be totally divorced from the architecture and color palette of 1975 Ford.
Great, thank you.
Giancarlo?
I agree with those comments. My other suggestion, why do we keep referring to a 1975 period reference?
It's an address,
It's
not
the street address.
The address.
Okay, sorry. Okay, my other issue is still this parking situation. We are now having 18 potential tenants here with 6 parking spaces. Where would the other people park? Let's say that each of those tenants has a vehicle. Where would the other 12 vehicles park? Street parking, is it an issue? Is it available?
I think Russell Bruce can address that. He's certainly got other similar properties. He has agreements for available parking somewhere else. His experience has been with 1975 Ford and 1981, the 2 buildings with 9 units that he's had. And last year he had 2 tenants that asked for parking permits in the parking lot. This year, he's got a few more, but it's,
Yeah.
many of those are students and don't necessarily have cars. So, Russell?
Yeah, I'd be glad to field your question, and I shall. But if you don't mind, just so I don't lose the thought, just to take a half step back on design. Uh, Forgive me for being a little bit maybe thick about this, but we've worked really quite hard to listen to much commentary. Last approval process with the last project, and now again recently with the neighborhood and with Euclid Corridor Design Review, with respect to contextual, scale, fitting, feeling like a house, words like that. And the result of that, in part, is what we see here today. I would be proud of this building personally, for what that is worth, but that's kind of how it grew up. And when you're now speaking about a different design concept that feels not like or less like an extension or an expansion of the existing historic building, maybe has a flat roof, feels more distinctive, and maybe is physically or feels aesthetically disconnected or less connected to the adjoining 1975, I cannot seem to fetch a mental image elsewhere in the city in the landmarks area that I could go look at, just to kind of get a felt sense of maybe where the sense of your commission is coming from. This is Kevin's expertise, of course, not mine, but I'm just wondering, do you all have in your mind's eye like a place or an example you might take the liberty of just throwing out that I could just understand?
Well, that's a great question. Director Wong, I see your hand went up when that question was thrown out. Do you have a?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And this is actually not a direct response to your question, Russell, but I want to caution from us going down the road of continuously asking the applicant to adjust. I don't think we were necessarily asking, but it is the role of the applicant to take the feedback and then come back with a proposal, which we then make a decision on. I think we've stated our preferences, but I just want to caution from kind of going back again and again to edit continuously, versus allowing the applicant to receive the feedback and make a decision for themselves on what they want and bring it back to the commission as a proposal. So that's where I'm at with these types of discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Brunges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff will be happy to work with the applicant offline to help find some examples. I don't think doing this in this forum is probably the most appropriate time and give us time to do some research and assist and work with some of the design comments as well. Thank you.
All right, so now I should probably finish answer the question that was posed to me now that I've digressed for the moment. Yes, over this call, there's been some questions about trash, parking, etc. The very simple. The trash is handled with the dumpster in the rear. I think Commission member maybe Anderson asked about that. We could show you on the site plan the enclosure. It's twice as large as the one we have now, and we'll have no difficulty handling the trash. Parking too, we have solved. Believe me, it hasn't been straightforward. The short answer of it is the 6 new parking spaces in the new lot will be adequate to serve the 6 new apartments in this new building. Absolutely. With respect to the 2 existing buildings, there's 9 apartments between 1975 Ford and 1981 Ford. And there's a memo that's in the file there somewhere that I wrote that you all have. It kind of details what I'm about to summarize, which is only a modest percentage of our renters at any given time use cars or have cars. That's the good news. That actually has been declining as a percentage. over the last number of years. That said, to the extent we actually need them, we have an agreement which has been written about and long spoken about with University Circle Inc. for 20 parking spaces right across the street in what is now the Ford Road Garage, and before too long will become the Ford Road Surface Parking Lot. So there's 20 spaces there, more than enough to serve the two existing buildings. Just in case that even weren't enough, or people were looking for a reason to make this a cause célèbre, there's also plenty of opportunity for students, and in those two existing buildings are students. Walk down the street a couple of minutes and get a hang tag and park in the existing Case Western garage. So it's very much a case of belt and suspenders with respect to parking. More than covered.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention and submitting that for our records. We appreciate that.
Sure.
Does the applicant have any additional questions, or do you feel like you have direction to keep moving forward? We will follow up, as Mr. Brunges said, and try to provide some examples.
I feel like we have very good input. Just would comment that it's an interesting position because we know very clearly that the neighborhood would like this to be more like a house. We are hearing from the commission, who ultimately approves or disapproves, that there might be an interest in making it much less like a house. So we look forward to the challenge, but it is an interesting spot to be in.
Understand, and we look forward to your creativity when you return, and how you choose to move forward. Right. Well, with that will conclude our conceptual review and we will move on to the administrative reports. Mr. Brunges?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To start, I'm going to turn this over to Director Wong for some comments.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Carl. I wanted just to share that, with the Planning Commission, we have seen folks try to reach out to members to individually lobby on specific projects. And this could be anywhere from the developer or an institution or community members. It is my policy that, applicants or developers or even community members refrain from directly contacting Landmarks Commission members, Planning Commission members, Board of Zoning Appeals, Board of Building Standards and Appeals, but rather we have staff here that will receive those comments, will file them and post them in the folders for all to review beforehand. And so just generally speaking, wanted to create that awareness that that is a policy that we want to adhere to. And should you receive outreach, feel free to just forward those emails onto the staff, who will then compile them and then put them into the folder. And we just want to make sure that there's a system and a process to ensure that voices are heard and community members are heard, but that there's no individual lobbying outside of that. And again, this is across all different types of projects. That will just keep the process a lot more clean. So I wanted to share that with the Landmarks Commission. With that, I'll turn it back over to Carl.
Thank you, Director. There is no second meeting this month. Happy Thanksgiving and all. We will have a large agenda on December 8th. I think I see, including one somewhat controversial item, but I think I see 8 items. So I will get everything out to you as soon as possible. So please have everything reviewed, ready to go to move it. I think we did a great job today moving forward through a lot of projects quickly, so we can keep that going. And we will have a meeting on December 22nd as well. I do have 3 items already scheduled for that. So if you are unable to attend that, please let me know. I have to make sure I have a quorum. I don't think I have any other announcement at this time. Does anybody else?
Carl, I wonder also at the next meeting if you might be able to provide the calendar for the commission for all of the 2023 meetings so that they can be placed on our individual calendars, and so that we're aware of when they're happening, and if there's anyone that is going to be away, so that we can know in advance. That would be great. Thanks.
We will do that, yes.
All right. If there are no additional reports, then we will adjourn for today.
Can I
And
just ask with regard to next year, is it planned that we'll continue to meet virtually throughout 2023?
I can answer that. So we have been working so hard on room 514. We just have a last few final touches that we need in order to maximize the hybrid capability. So we have our TV screens up, but we're waiting on wireless microphones in order to better pick up the audio. And then we do need the 2 screens in the room to talk to one another. The idea is we're seeking to
Hybrid.
yes, we're seeking to do hybrid. We're just waiting on those wireless microphones. I anticipate that come February, we'll have more news about when we're ready to go, but we will have hybrid. I think that hybrid will allow for that personal touch between the commission members, between the applicant and the commission, as well as any observers, community members, but also that for those who are out of town, like we saw today, you know, they can still attend the meeting virtually without having to fly in or to make an extra trip. So I think the silver lining of this whole process of going onto WebEx has shown us that it can be done. You know, I like many of you, I really appreciate the in-person touch because I think that type of dialogue in person is richer. But for anyone who is unable to come down to City Hall and 601 Lakeside, there is the hybrid option. Thank you.
any additional questions from the commission? No? All right, now we will adjourn. I hope everyone has a very
Happy Thanksgiving.
enjoyable Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it.
Bye, everyone.